Stick with me here. You and I are about to witness an office worker fighting to survive a frozen hell alongside his coworker. Although he wanted to keep her warm, he knew she would just be a burden and planned to leave her behind. But a few desperate words changed his mind. It seems like this time, the perfect opportunity didn't fall to the wrong person. Arthur works for the noble house Sterling in London. His boss is a complete jerk who humiliates him daily, but his beautiful friend is there. It feels like she is hiding a request but is too shy to ask. Then, the deadly cold truly settles in. News reports show the world is falling apart. Temperatures are plummeting everywhere, and it is even snowing in the middle of Africa. There is water nearby, but it is all solid ice. He attempts to head back to work, but with the elevators dead, he takes the stairs while nearly freezing. In times like these, our hero just curls up in a ball to hide from the biting frost. The office is pitch black except for strange metallic clanking. Suddenly, a zombie stumbles in to greet him, so he bolts for safety and locks his coworker outside. An emergency broadcast announces that a lethal virus is spreading fast across the city. Now humans are devouring each other just to stay alive. Interestingly, a mysterious system appeared to him days ago, offering specialized gear to kill the undead. It felt like a hallucination until reality hit. Suddenly, the entire internet goes dark and leaves him isolated. The air is colder than the Arctic, so he navigates the stairwell using only his phone's dim flashlight. He finds a fresh set of clothes and changes. After all, he might see that girl again and needs to look sharp. He also stumbles upon a bag of supplies and a blanket. In the manager's office, he finds a heavy golf club to use. 3 days have passed since the frost began, and things are only getting worse by the hour. Rescue helicopters are a distant dream. The system offers a warm coat for sale, but he has zero money and falls asleep feeling completely hopeless and depressed. Suddenly, a loud noise at the door jolts him awake from his sleep. He grabs his golf club, ready for a fight, but pay attention, what's waiting behind that door isn't a zombie at all. He recognizes the man, who explains he used the emergency exit to reach this floor. When asked for food, Arthur chooses to lie and hide his supplies. He says he is out of food but offers water. However, the man grabs his arm with a dark, suspicious look, questioning if he is telling the truth. Arthur starts getting a bad feeling about the situation while filling a bottle in the bathroom. He noticed the man was sweating despite the sub-zero temperatures, but he tries to brush it off as simple paranoia. Suddenly, a zombie lunges at him, but he smashes it with the bottle and kicks its ribs hard. It was the man from earlier, turned in an instant despite being fine moments ago. Arthur grabs his club and gives his former colleague a permanent, brutal head massage. If he had headaches before, he doesn't anymore. With that, the system notifies him that he has successfully earned 1 coin. That was incredibly fast. Upon checking the man's arm, he finds the bite mark that caused the sudden infection. Walking back, he hears a commotion outside. Looking through the window, he spots a lone survivor desperately fighting off a massive pack of hungry zombies all by himself. He didn't stand a chance. The man was violently torn apart and transformed into a monster within a few seconds. 3 more days pass and phone batteries are now just useless bricks. He spends his hours staring out the window to save every bit of his remaining energy. From his high vantage point, he watches groups of desperate people trying to flee. Now, you and I both know sitting still is a death sentence. Everyone he sees turns into a monster, so he realizes he must move to survive. So if possible, he wants to find reliable survivors within the tower. His goal is the 6th floor to check if the main entrance is truly blocked, as Kevin had claimed. Suddenly, the overhead lights flicker on. Arthur rushes to the window, hoping that civilization has finally restored order to the city. But the whole city remains a dark graveyard, completely shattering all of Arthur's hopes. He concludes that someone must have manually started the building's emergency generator. As he creeps forward, he worries the power might fail again, so he needs to find the other survivors before it is too late. He bets the person responsible is in the administrative office or the security hub down on the first floor. Before descending further, he removes his shoes to ensure his movements are completely silent and stealthy. Arthur reaches the 6th floor and peeks inside. He notices a room barricaded from the interior, which fills him with sudden joy. Now he is certain there are other humans alive in the building, but he decides to keep his distance. He wonders why the zombies haven't breached the upper floors yet, but considering the state of the lobby, the ground floor is likely crawling with them. However, as he cracks open the door to the 1st floor, he stares directly into a massive horde. So what do you and I think? Is he lunch? Escaping this building won't be easy. Arthur is relieved the monsters are still outside, but you and I know it is only a matter of time before those doors shatter. Moving fast, he navigates the halls toward the main office, only to stumble upon a kind old friend who unfortunately had already met a grim end. Looking at the frozen body, Arthur realizes the man succumbed to the biting cold. He gently closes the man's eyes, offering a final prayer for his soul. Next, he cautiously approaches the security post looking for other survivors. Though he is terrified they might have set lethal traps for intruders. He knocks softly to avoid attracting the undead, but pay attention here, because the door swings open before he even touches the handle. A figure lunges out with a weapon, but Arthur is quick enough to parry the strike with his heavy bat. The noise draws the ghouls closer, so the frantic man in glasses pulls Arthur inside and slams the heavy door shut just in time. Panting in the dark, the two men verify that neither of them is turning. Arthur explains the generator drew him here in search of living souls. To ease the tension, he shares his name and title. The stranger introduces himself as Julian, a member of the Development Guild who had been hiding out. Arthur initially worries about the infection, but Julian isn't showing the usual signs of fever or sweat. He seems strangely chilled, almost as if he had been frozen. Seeing that the man has kept his sanity and composure, Arthur figures he is safe for now. Arthur tries to offer some comfort, but Julian remains wary and keeps his distance. Realizing he needs to break the ice, Arthur pulls out his pack and offers the man a rare cigarette to calm his nerves. Julian hesitates for a second before accepting, admitting that the small luxury finally makes him feel alive again. Arthur nods solemnly. In this dying world, these tiny comforts are the only thing keeping them sane. When Arthur mentions he has only had a small bit of chocolate, Julian begins frantically searching through the supplies in his backpack. Arthur expects him to pull out a few simple rations, but Julian produces a dry pack of ramen, warning him that eating too quickly is a rookie mistake for someone in their position. They share a grim laugh about the empty larders on the 2nd floor, realizing there is no point in saving food for a future that might never come. Arthur asks for a status report on the lower levels, and Julian's face goes pale as he describes the horror. He had been trapped with a friend, and they had managed to split what little food they had left. But his companion lost his mind and insisted on leaving, even though Julian begged him to wait for the night's rescue. You and I both know how that ended. The man walked out and was torn apart instantly by the 4 ravenous zombies waiting just outside. Julian was eventually forced to flee his hiding spot once his magical battery began to flicker and die. He managed to slip away by throwing a heavy object to lure the monsters in the opposite direction. Arthur is impressed that he managed to outsmart 4 of those beasts alone. It turns out Julian was the one who fired up the emergency generator just to charge his precious communication devices. Arthur wonders if it's even worth the risk, but Julian is shocked that he's been surviving without any outside news. There is no standard signal, but Julian has access to a specialized satellite network that is still functioning. Most of the world is offline, but there are still a few surviving communities sharing vital information in the shadows. Arthur's device finally connects, and he breathes a sigh of relief as he scans the latest updates from the world. Suddenly, the hum of the machines falters as the emergency generator begins to run out of its remaining fuel. Changing the subject, Julian asks Arthur what his next move is, since he intends to stay put. Arthur senses that the man doesn't want to share his limited supplies, and he honestly doesn't blame him. In a world this broken, every scrap counts. He tells Julian he is heading back out to explore the rest of the building. To help him survive the dark, Julian hands over a sturdy flashlight and a portable charger for his devices. To square the debt, Arthur leaves behind a few more cigarettes so the man can find some peace in the dark. Arthur slips out as Julian wishes him luck, passing by a cluster of undead who are fortunately too distracted to notice him. He reaches the cold stairwell. For a moment, he considers heading for the garage to grab his carriage and flee, but he quickly realizes that venturing into the open streets would be a complete death sentence right now. He decides to climb higher to gather more intelligence before making his final move to escape. The lights flicker out completely, but he stays calm, clicking on his new flashlight to pierce the darkness. Moving with ghostly silence, he heads up, sensing that he and I are about to find someone else on the next floor. Arthur isn't sure if it's a man or a ghoul, so he grabs his mace and heads inside anyway. Trust me, this is wild. Climbing the stairs, Arthur finds a noblewoman who has already turned into a mindless, rotting ghoul. Arthur thinks he can use her distraction to strike, but the undead spots him and lunges. He barely manages to defend himself, slamming her hard against the cold stone wall. She just won't quit and keeps coming. This time he hits her and smashes her into the steps, but she's still moving. With his iron mace completely bent, he finally delivers the killing blow. After that, Arthur earns another silver coin like before. He wonders where that ghoul came from since the heavy gates were locked. He figures the 7th floor isn't safe either. After finding a spot to drink some water, he realizes that last undead was incredibly fast, moving more like a wild animal. If there were more than one, he'd be finished. He needs to find other survivors or make sure every fight stays strictly one-on-one. He checks the scrying network, but it's just people complaining about the magical frost taking over the kingdom. He's annoyed there's no info about the ghouls, just survivors crying out and begging for the king to rescue them. So, Arthur assumes the royal court has basically collapsed. He feels hopeless, because it seems he'll have to survive alone in a world that the gods have abandoned. By the 5th day, the magical cold becomes even worse. To keep from freezing, he does exercises to warm up, but that makes him starving and he needs more calories to survive. Arthur takes off his boots to explore because they're too loud. He heads out to find proper rations before things get even worse. Based on what was said, half the rations should still be inside the bag carried by his undead former comrade. The problem is there are likely more than 4 ghouls, and there's no way to grab the bag without them noticing. Arthur decides the only way to get it is to separate them one by one. Now watch this part closely. Arthur is mapping their locations, but one monster is still missing. He decides to find better tools to fight first. Next, he enters a seemingly empty chamber. Inside, he finds some basic non-food supplies. Suddenly, he hears a ghoul in the hallway. He grabs a cup and throws it to lure the creature's attention. The beast takes the bait perfectly, and our hero takes the chance to smack it right in the head. The noise draws more ghouls in, but Arthur shuts the door before they get inside. He's glad his plan worked perfectly. Without noticing, his leg gets grabbed, and it's the very same undead he hit just a moment ago. It tries to bite his heel, but he stops it by stomping on its head. After that, the protagonist uses his mace to finish the job. Then he turns his attention to the others. He decides to end this now before even more ghouls are pulled over. So, he breaks the door's window and tosses a metal spoon to use as a quick distraction. One ghoul runs straight toward it, leaving the other alone. The kid opens the door and grabs his hidden gear. Meanwhile, the undead that got lured by the spoon hears a noise and goes to check the area. But it ends up tripping and gets taken out. Now, our hero has a total of 4 silver coins. Looking at his ruined weapon, he knows he can't keep using it. Finally, he manages to grab the bag full of supplies. However, he is now completely unarmed. He wonders if he should explore the rest of the tower, since his coworkers probably stayed in the pantry. He's thrilled because in the first guard chamber, he scored a portable mana stone and even some healing elixirs. You and I know he should stop here, but he decides to ride that momentum and check the second hall. Suddenly, he hears a noise and freaks out because he has nothing to defend himself with. He decides to just run for it. Arthur jokes that he never thought he'd feel safe in a stone chamber, especially in a situation like this. Right after that, he decides to check his loot. Inside the bag, there's a massive amount of food. He's relieved because it's enough to last another month, but he still hasn't solved the problem of the freezing cold. Before dealing with that, he decides to clean the grime off his body. While washing up, he complains about the freezing water. Then, he notices a wound on his heel and wonders if a ghoul did it. Still, he doesn't worry much because he thinks you have to get bitten to turn into them. He checks the scrying network and confirms the theory since someone was scratched by a ghoul without turning. Arthur gets up relieved, but there's still a problem. He needs a way to warm up his feet. He opens the magical shop to see winter gear, but the prices are insane. Trust me, you and I would be livid too. You and I are about to watch Julian struggle just to survive this nightmare. He buys some sturdy boots, and surprisingly, they fit so perfectly it is like they were enchanted just for him. Julian stares at his gear, knowing boots alone won't keep him breathing for long. He scours the shop again, stumbling upon a curious item that he buys instantly. It is a pack of purifying cloths to feel human again, but on day 7, the water vanishes too. He had stashed 2 liters of water, sensing trouble, but that supply will only last for a few more days. Dejected, he collapses, cursed by the timing of the water cut just as he felt his fighting spirit returning. Checking the arcane bulletin, he sees rumors that the king has completely abandoned the common folk. Elsewhere, some brave soul posts that he is heading to a nearby village mart to scavenge for any supplies. He promises to update the survivors if he makes it back alive. Staring at the stone ceiling, Julian realizes the arcane bulletins are falling silent, meaning most people have likely already perished in the chaos. He stands up and scans the horizon, seeing 0 signs of life through the dusty window. Now pay attention here, because Julian refuses to believe he is the last one standing in this hellscape. 8 days pass, and that guy from the mart hasn't posted a single word. He knows that despite having some rations and water left, he can't hide here forever. To survive, he needs a band of allies because venturing out alone is pure suicide. The biggest problem, he needs real steel if he wants to move safely. All the kid has left is 1 iron-headed mace, which will probably snap after crushing 3 ghoul skulls. Julian finds a heavy warhammer, but it costs 5 crowns, money he could use for warm winter clothes. He grabs his last mace and decides to scout the other floors, eventually finding a trashed room that feels both eerily empty and abandoned. The dark blood stains look like they've been there for ages. Suddenly, the stench of rot hits him, but there are no bodies. He reaches for a door, but it is locked tight. He wonders if a survivor is cowering on the other side, but hears only silence. Julian smashes the lock with his mace. Inside, he finds a horrifying mountain of ghouls piled high. It is shocking. It would have taken at least 10 nights to clear a room like that. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. A team that strong. That is exactly what he needs to survive this nightmare. But the room is empty of supplies. He sips some elixir and wonders if those warriors are still in the tower. Suddenly, Julian spots a scrap of parchment tucked behind the elixir font. It is a letter from the squad that cleared this floor. The man explains he is leaving the building on day 8, heading for a secluded island on the west coast that should actually stay safe from the undead horde. Julian groans. Those survivors left the tower just 1 day before he arrived. Then he realizes the author is an old acquaintance who always bragged about being a special forces knight. Julian also notices a note on the back saying there is a gift in the drawer. It is a few tokens for the elixir font, which actually makes him crack a genuine smile. The next day, he reads the warning again. Avoid the 5th floor. He wonders why, since it shouldn't logically be swarming with the undead. But a night like that doesn't give warnings for no reason. Julian realizes it has been far too long since he's seen another living soul. Every passing hour makes his chances of finding a team drop even lower than before. He decides to scour the other floors, refusing to let another chance slip away. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light hits him right in the eyes, and he panics, thinking it's a signal. Looking at the tower next door, he spots someone. They try to speak, but the distance is just too great. He uses his magical spyglass to focus. On the sign, the person says there are people on the 6th and 7th floors, plus another survivor with him. Julian gets excited. There are more survivors nearby. He decides to focus on his building first and help the others later. Julian grips his iron-headed mace and heads out to find allies. He recalls the entrance was blocked and hopes they have cleared it now, so he is not mistaken for a monster. He shouts his name, declaring that he isn't a threat. But the entrance looks like it was smashed open. Did someone else actually reach them before him? Suddenly, a ghoul lunges. He blocks and kicks the beast. "Trust me, you and I need to see what comes next." Julian grabs a heavy table to finish the job, securing more gold. Julian starts searching for other survivors, wondering if he was lured into a trap. Suddenly, a doorknob behind him begins to turn. "Stick with me, we're about to see who's hiding." He claims he's no threat, while inside, someone trembles against the door. Julian mentions he is part of the merchant guild too. If they do not open up, he warns he will have to break the door down. Just as he strikes, the door opens and a girl named Sarah appears. They sit to talk, and Julian is shocked she survived on this floor alone. She explains a man begged for entry last night. Sensing danger, she refused to help. The man grew desperate and tried to force his way into her sanctuary. Sarah fled to the storage room to hide. Within an hour, that desperate man had already transformed into a mindless undead. Curious about her survival, Julian asks if she has any weapons. She reveals a simple wooden spear she crafted herself. She explains she took a staff and sharpened the tip with a small blade, creating a surprisingly deadly weapon. Seeing dried blood on the point, Julian realizes this girl has already faced the monsters and survived. Pay attention. Julian is realizing how cruel this world truly is. Women are targets for both the undead and desperate men. Julian stands up, deciding it is time to leave the girl behind. Sarah grabs his arm in a panic, terrified of being left behind to face the darkness without any help. Julian apologizes, insisting he cannot help her right now. Before he can leave, Sarah reveals she is a trained duelist who cleared the entire 6th floor of monsters herself. She warns him he will regret losing such a strong ally. Hearing her battle history, Julian is left completely speechless. An alliance is formed. She shows him a satchel filled with fine clothes and rations she managed to scavenge. He asks for magic charging stones, but she has none. Julian explains they are vital for the long-distance communication relics. He wonders how many undead are lurking in this cursed place. She confirms there are 8 monsters left, making him relieved he decided to join forces with her after all. "You saw those marks on the door too, right?" Sarah explains they were left by the man who tried to hunt her. Julian searches further and finds a heavy iron lever. He is thrilled to find a weapon, even if it is short. Suddenly, Sarah has a brilliant idea. She decides to attach it to the tip of her spear. Julian admits it is perfect for both stabbing and crushing. He realizes that having a strong ally makes surviving this nightmare much easier than going alone. They realize they have enough supplies to keep their bellies full while they plan their next move. Julian wonders where she even found a heavy iron pan. She says she intended to return it, but forgot. It will be perfect for melting snow into drinking water. Sarah asks how he even knew she was hiding in the break room. He explains he received a message from the neighboring manor about survivors wanting to form a larger group. She asks if he trusts them, but Julian is wary of teaming up with complete strangers in this chaos. Sarah admits she only asked to join him because she feared never finding someone she could truly trust. She wants no one else in their group. Julian agrees they will keep to themselves for now. She mentions their old lord might still be alive, as he abandoned her on the first day of the siege. Julian asks exactly when they were separated, and she confirms it happened on the second day of the outbreak. She suspects Lord Croft is hiding on either the third or fifth floor of the Citadel. While she sleeps, Julian worries the other survivors might join Lord Croft and hunt them down later, but he chooses not to focus on things he cannot control. He decides to spend his gold coins to enchant and upgrade his winter traveling gear. A warm hood would be incredibly useful in this cold. However, he worries that leaving his partner with bare feet will turn her into a burden if she cannot move. Realizing he is being selfish, he puts the choice off. The next morning, he finds her checking her communication relic. Surprised he is awake, he explains the biting cold makes it impossible to sleep soundly. Julian asks if she charged all the energy stones, and she confirms they are ready. So what do you and I make of this duo? Sarah shows the device is at 22% and asks about the solar generator on the roof. All right, you and I are diving into a story where survival is the only law left. Julian admits he was clueless, but 𝒑𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏 says she managed the project for a guild. Initially, the plan was to mount the heat artifact atop the high tower. But the project was scrapped after they found a fatal flaw before its release to the kingdom. Julian asks if she can operate the machine, and she confirms she was the lead responsible for the project. Hearing that, he decides they must inspect it, so the two climb to the snow-covered parapets together. The sight of the frost is chilling. They find an old siege ladder. Julian tries to pull it down, but the iron is frozen solid and refuses to budge. 𝒑𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏 offers to climb up herself, asking only that he keep the ladder steady for her. Julian gives her a boost. Watching her scale the wall, he realizes her training as a knight really paid off. She moves with an athlete's grace. At the summit, she finally locates the heat artifact they desperately need. Now watch this part carefully. The relic is light enough for her to dismantle and toss down piece by piece. She starts handing him the runic plates. Eventually, they gather every component. Julian worries if the gray skies will dampen the rune's power and leave them in the cold. 𝒑𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏 explains that under a bright sun, the crystal can restore half the amulet's divine energy. A day passes with only 8% charge. 𝒑𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏 sighs, knowing nature itself is currently against their survival. The sun remains hidden, but Julian already knows their next destination after they leave this manor's safe walls. He means the guild's grand armory. It holds more than just rations. It has the tools they need to survive this winter. If the carriage's mapping rune fails, they must rely on the amulet, but its divine energy is fading fast. 𝒑𝒏 isn't worried. The armory is near her old estate. She knows the path by heart from her daily walks through the valley. Julian is genuinely relieved he met her. He realizes that partnering with a skilled lady like 𝒑𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏 was a masterstroke. She is talented and tireless. He asks for her size, planning to gift her sturdy enchanted boots if they can find a pair. Grateful, she tells him. Julian brings the boots, and they fit her feet as if forged specifically for her by a master. You and I both saw that coming, but then a magical crest appears. A party is formed, and all tribute from members now flows to him. Julian understands now. To survive this apocalypse, he needs more vassals under his banner. He wonders why the crest appeared only after the gift. 𝒑𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏 notices his dazed look and grows concerned for her new comrade. Julian blames it on the lack of proper meals lately, masking his true thoughts with a simple, believable excuse. They set out to scavenge. By the 14th day, thirst becomes a greater enemy than the cold, and they are suffering. He suggests they melt the fallen snow to stay hydrated. 𝒑𝒏 gathers old documents for fuel. Julian will build the fire on the tower, but he fears the rising smoke will only lead the bandits straight to them. Vile men who have abandoned their humanity in these dark times. Desperate for warmth, they light it anyway. 𝒑𝒏 feels the heat and finally feels her spirit return to her shivering body. She holds a pan of snow over the flames, turning white frost into life-saving water for them both to drink. Drinking the warm liquid, Julian feels a wave of emotion wash over him. 𝒑𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏 weeps, glad they didn't perish. Julian vows they will survive this winter together until the very end of this nightmare. Morning comes. Julian is woken by 𝒑𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏, who warns that a rival faction is trying to communicate and is marching toward them. He asks when the message was sent. She says it was only moments ago. The scouts have spotted them and are closing in fast. Julian knows these men cannot be trusted. They are dangerous predators. They see the group emerging from the adjacent manor. Instantly, the two of them scramble to pack their heavy gear. Below, the intruders dispatch the undead husks with terrifying, disciplined formation. At this rate, they will arrive in 15 minutes. Sir Julian and his companion have already packed up all their belongings. Out on the street, those invaders charge through the ghouls swarming the path. One warrior smashes a window with a heavy warhammer, breaching the building's defenses so they can finally get inside. Julian looks back, worried 𝒑𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏 is lagging. She hesitates, unwilling to leave the runic plates behind, because without them they have no power. He snaps at her that their lives are worth more than any treasure. She relents and runs, but the sound of heavy boots echoing nearby tells them their time is almost up. Julian pauses. Should they descend the stairs to fight or retreat further up to the high tower? So what do you and I take from this? If they climb higher, the frost will surely kill them before the enemy blades reach them. All right, stick with me because Julian and his ally are about to face a literal siege. Meanwhile, the invaders begin their ascent, and Julian realizes the threat is closing in. Sienna is totally confused, so Julian explains that those men are likely hunting survivors as they climb higher and higher. Julian tells her to draw her sword, but the silence feels wrong to Sienna. Suddenly, the tower trembles, though they remain unharmed. She suspects a blast, and he agrees. He wonders why they would use such heavy magic or explosives for just 2 people. He recalls the warning letter about the 5th floor, and Lord Cedric's face comes to mind. Julian clears their barricade and tells Sienna they are heading down because if his theory is correct, they might just survive the ruins. Julian warns her to keep her guard up as they enter the dark ruin. Now watch this, because what they find next is straight out of a horror story. He finds a shattered door and hears a furious, familiar voice coming from within. It is Lord Cedric muttering about having no choice, confirming he caused that massive blast. Julian calls out, and Cedric actually smiles when he sees his former knight. But Julian recoils. Cedric is missing his lower half, desperately crawling and begging for life. Sienna arrives, hearing the noble's voice. Cedric recognizes her and begs for her help. Julian apologizes. They are not healers and have no magic to mend such a wound. Cedric panics, claiming he will survive even if he turns into a mindless ghoul. He begs them to carry him down to the gates to meet the undead. Julian refuses. Cedric snaps, calling them traitors after he supposedly held back the looters. He accuses Sienna of betting Julian, just to survive this nightmare alone together. He sneers at her, saying she replaced him with a commoner far too quickly. Before he can spew more filth, Julian ends him. Outside, the looter's presence is confirmed. Sienna is paralyzed by the shock. Julian tells her the noble was doomed anyway. Ending his life, early, was a mercy compared to the slow death he faced. He tells her there is no reason for her to carry this guilt. She mentions the ghoul idea, but Julian knows they would have just killed him later. From the window, they see the fields are now teeming with even more undead. I know what you're thinking, things can't get worse. Well, look at the fields. Julian is frustrated. That chaos will attract more bandits alongside the growing horde of ghouls. The undead had scattered briefly, but now the main gates were completely swarmed. The lobby is a death trap. Julian tells her they need a new plan to escape the tower within 2 days at most. Then Julian tells his partner they need to scout the ground level. They grab their lanterns and descend. Suddenly, Sienna freezes, hearing a strange noise. Julian hears it above them. Through a door, they spot a lone ghoul wandering. Sienna feels nauseous, wondering if that creature was once Lord Cedric. Julian says no. They struck his head specifically to prevent him from rising again. Perhaps it was a bandit. Julian doubts it, as they were still human before. He figures it is a forgotten survivor, or a stray that climbed through a window. They hope it is just a survivor, not ghouls that have learned to climb. At the ground floor, they peek out and see a massive legion of undead. Julian is stunned. The situation is far more desperate than he ever imagined. He looks toward the guardroom, wondering if Sir Jasper is still alive in there. Julian shuts the door, telling her that leaving this way would be pure suicide. Sienna suggests the underground vaults. Julian recalls monsters there, but decides to check. You and I have to wonder, is the vault a shortcut or a trap? Stick with me. Sophie counts 10 monsters ahead, but Julian knows this is already 1,000,000 times better than the lobby. Looking at the abandoned vehicles, Julian notes they have plenty of steel shells to use as cover from the monsters. Since the air is completely still, they can move through the shadows without the undead catching their scent, all while Julian checks for reflections in the mirrors high above. Sophie struggles to see through the frozen gloom with her poor eyesight. But she adjusts her focus and finally spots the entrance connecting the passage to the first floor. Julian nods and leads her back up to the 7th floor to finalize their escape plan. Arthur suggests using the cars, but Julian explains they have been sitting in the biting cold for too long. The batteries are likely dead, so they agree to plan a dangerous route out of the building on foot. At -35 degrees, and with only 5 hours left before they must leave, the cold is becoming just as deadly as the monsters themselves. Julian asks if his stress is that obvious, and Sophie mentions he has been tossing and turning all night. He admits his mind is on his loyal friend, who is still trapped down on the 1st floor. Sophie says he should join them, but Julian knows it would put her in danger, even though Arthur is a man he trusts with his life. Suddenly, Julian changes his mind and asks if it is truly all right for his friend to come with them. Sophie agrees, and Julian stands up, telling her he needs to use his communication device. He sends a message telling Arthur to reach the emergency exit if he wants to survive. But as the sun rises, Julian is met with nothing but silence. Despite the lack of an answer, he chooses to believe his friend is already at the meeting spot waiting. But the lobby is empty, and Sophie asks if they should wait just a little bit longer for him. They cannot wait anymore and head to the garage, only to find a fresh zombie blocking their path. Julian whispers for her to stay calm and stick to the original plan they carefully laid out. As they sneak behind the row of cars, Sophie watches the dead wandering aimlessly until one monster stops right in their path, blocking them entirely. Julian stands tall and stomps his boot. Watch closely. He is risking everything to draw its attention. The monster charges, but Sophie is faster, driving her spear through its head before it can even reach them. With that kill, Julian earns another coin, proving that Sophie is a valuable member of his surviving party. Sophie suggests they seek sanctuary at the cathedral, knowing the mindless undead are incapable of climbing those massive, winding stone stairs. Progress is slow through the biting snowstorm, but Julian insists this path is their only real chance at survival. Their destination is finally in sight, but hundreds of monsters stand between them and the safety of the sanctuary. They begin to creep forward, but then a sudden, violent gust of wind rips through the frozen air. The shifting wind is a death sentence, carrying their scent to the hungry horde who immediately begin a frantic, terrifying sprint toward them. Sophie panics as the creatures swarm, having no idea how they can possibly survive this onslaught. Julian realizes the cathedral is a trap, as the monsters would just pile up and draw even more attention. I know what you're thinking, they need cover fast. But every open door is a death trap, and breaking into a locked building would just signal their location. Sophie screams that they have to decide now, and they spot an abandoned bus sitting right next to them. They both try to force the bus door open, but it will not budge. Sophie suggests smashing the glass, but Julian tells her to give him a moment. Julian uses his spear as a lever, putting all his strength into it until the door finally snaps open. With the horde closing in, he fumbles with the keys he found, desperate to lock the world out. They both hold their breath as the first monster reaches the door, only for Sophie to react and strike. More bodies pile against the glass, and the metal begins to groan under the sheer weight and pressure. Just as hope fades, the engine roars to life at the perfect moment, and Julian floors the pedal so hard it knocks his teammate over. He tells her to hold on tight as he prepares to blast through the wall of monsters. The bus slides toward a building as Julian realizes the frozen streets have made the tires completely useless. He swerves hard to avoid a head-on collision, scraping the side of the bus against the stone building. The exit is blocked, but the thunderous noise has drawn every zombie in the district to their location. Sophie suggests a distraction, but Julian knows that means certain death for whoever steps outside that door. Julian grits his teeth, knowing the sheer weight of the mob could tip the bus over, refusing to believe his story ends in this frozen cage. Suddenly, a nearby bin is smashed, drawing the monsters away and letting you and I breathe a massive sigh of relief for them. All right, you and I are watching a world where simple food runs become nightmares. She points out that whatever crushed that bin fell from the nearby keep, likely the second or third floor. She's hopeful it is a living human. Suddenly, the two of them spot a woman waving from a window. Sarah sees her glass lens. She uses her stone to signal thanks, and the lady gives a thumbs up. Sir James realizes there are still decent people left in this dying kingdom. He mentions he would love to share some rations, but admits he finished them all before they met. Sarah laughs, unable to believe his appetite. She suggests their best bet for food is the Grand Depot. Nightfall finally arrives, and the freezing chill hits them way harder than usual. James asks if she is all right since her face is pale. These thin windows just aren't keeping the frost out. Sarah tries to act tough, telling him she is fine. But her lips are blue, and she is shivering uncontrollably. He knows they have to get warm immediately. Sarah wonders if there is any way to survive without risking a fire. James thinks for a moment and decides they are starting a fire regardless, though she doubts it is possible. He plans to vent the smoke through the roof so they don't suffocate, since using windows would invite a deadly attack. With a heavy spear, the girl punches 4 holes in the ceiling, allowing them to start a fire with old papers. Wait, pay attention here. Sarah mentions rumors on the network about survivors in a carriage, and she wants to join their group. Arthur asks where that user is, and the stranger replies that they are currently hiding upstairs in a trade shop. To be safe, the stranger asks them to identify the specific carriage parked outside, and they get the answer right. After that, the stranger stops playing games and asks to join their small party. Arthur is curious about the next move. By dawn, a man wakes up and checks the chaos outside his window. But then he spots a zombie scaling the wall. Panicked, he starts throwing everything he owns at the monster. I know what you're thinking here. The man recognizes the undead as his neighbor who is a climber. It seems ghouls keep their living skills. Around 9 a.m., Arthur and his partner finally step off the transport carriage. Clara asks what he thinks about those community reports, and he says he saw this coming a mile away. He explains the monsters breached the office through a hole left by an explosion on the Lord Chamberlain's floor. Right then, a woman walks out. Clara is thrilled, even jealous of the woman's warm furs. But before they can even say hello, a zombie lunges out and attacks the poor woman. They watch the horror unfold. Clara realizes more ghouls are being drawn in, and they will be next if they stay. James turns to run, but his partner is completely paralyzed by the sight. He grabs her arm and shouts that they have to move now. Shaking, she forces herself forward with him. Eventually, they reach the tunnels. The woman asks if going underground is wise, fearing a swarm below. Thousands of citizens were heading home through these tunnels right before the kingdom fell. The wind howls again, forcing them into the dark, but surprisingly, they don't see any movement. The only things they find in the tunnels are those who did not survive the initial chaos. Arthur notes the body count is low, meaning the real threat is likely trapped somewhere deeper inside. His partner points toward a trade stall, sparking excitement that quickly dies when they see the place is empty. She suggests checking the back room. Inside, they manage to find a few cans of ale. Back outside, she sighs about the stolen clothes, but James finds it strange the artifact shop is untouched. She estimates they still have about 20 kilometers to go, much further than they originally planned. She also shows him a picture of some desperate message written on a wall during the collapse. Before they can look closer, the stone battery dies. They have got to follow the tracks on foot. The silence is eerie. It is too clean, not even a rat or a bat is in sight. What do you and I make of this? A clean tunnel isn't safe, it's a warning. All right, you and I are about to watch a supply run turn into a total nightmare as Julian finds an abandoned carriage. They search the interior but find 0 survivors. No bodies, nothing. Then Serafina discovers a heavy iron dagger hidden inside an old chest. Julian mentions finding something useful earlier too. It is an enchanted sound stone, and he plans to use its chime to lure the monsters away. With the search finished, they step back outside, but waiting for them in the shadows is a rotting, hungry dreadwalker. Julian freezes. This thing is massive, standing at least 2 meters tall and radiating pure malice. Serafina recognizes him as a legendary knight from the Old Kingdom. Julian whispers that they need to avoid this beast at all costs. The two try to slip away quietly, but the monster catches their scent in the stale air. The creature lunges, and Julian shouts for his partner to stick to the plan. He steps forward, driving his heavy spear deep into the monster's chest. Keeping her distance, the girl swings a heavy iron mace at its skull, but the weapon snaps under the sheer force of the impact. The undead beast immediately turns its focus toward her. Julian is stunned by its strength. The monster rips the spear from its own flesh and charges straight for Serafina with a roar. Watch this, she is no damsel. She dodges the strike and jams the jagged, broken mace right into its brain. Both of them catch their breath, shaken by how insanely powerful that thing was. Julian apologizes for failing to hold the line, but Serafina calms him down. In a fight like that, surviving was the only thing that mattered. Serafina suggests lashing the broken metal shard to Julian's spear. He loves the idea, knowing it will make his weapon even more lethal. She finishes the upgrade right then and there. Julian notes they have rested enough and insists they keep moving through the dark. She huffs in frustration, annoyed that they found all these carriages, but almost nothing they can actually use. Julian suspects scavengers got here first. They approach Northfold Station, but a massive explosion suddenly rocks the entire tunnel system. Even without knowing the cause, Julian decides that heading toward the blast is a suicide mission. They retreat back into the carriage for cover. Serafina asks what is happening, but Julian signals for silence while peering out into the gloom. He realizes something is coming, and he is right. A massive wave of undead is sprinting their way. Serafina asks if they should fight, but Julian says no. I know what you're thinking, but the danger is just starting as the horde rushes past their hiding spot. Serafina collapses in relief. Julian weighs their options. Should they follow the path of the horde or go back toward the source of that mysterious explosion? Serafina asks if they can just stay hidden here. Julian shakes his head. The monsters only missed them because of their frenzied state. If they were moving slowly, they would have smelled the humans for sure. Seeing no other choice, she agrees to follow his lead once more. They backtrack to avoid detection, but after running into more ghouls, Julian realizes they need to climb to a higher, safer position. He scales the platform wall first, thinking that if they stay quiet, they can finally bypass the threat. He reaches down for her, but his palms are slick with sweat. She slips and falls, instantly drawing the attention of every ghoul nearby. She lunges for his hand again, and Julian hauls her onto the platform just as claws snap at her. One monster grabs her ankle, but she jams her dagger into its face and kicks it away. They don't wait around to stay safe. Ascending the stairs, they encounter another rot walker. Julian drops low, giving Seraphina the perfect opening to take its head off. They push through the remaining threats with relative ease, until they finally reach a room they can actually defend. Julian asks about the view outside, but she says the darkness is too thick to see anything. He sighs in relief that they are still breathing. Then he notices Seraphina's leg, as she mentions feeling a sharp pain during the run. She panics, fearing the worst, but Julian checks the wound. It is just a shallow cut from some jagged metal, not a bite. She finally relaxes. Julian reassures her that he has survived similar scratches before without turning into one of those things. The weight of it all hits her, and she begins to cry, thinking her life was over. They use a healer kit to clean the wound. Julian admits they got lucky finding supplies in a place they already searched. He tells her to rest while he scavenges the area. Eventually, his searching pays off when he discovers a mysterious iron key. He is thrilled. Finding a secure lock means they finally have a safe place to sleep tonight. While it is not exactly what he wanted, he finds a scout's ledger nearby that contains the code for a secret wall vault. Julian moves to the safe to crack it, making it very clear to his partner that he knows exactly what he is doing. Seraphina asks how he knows the secrets. He was once a warden here, and trust me, you and I must see what's next. All right, you and I are jumping into a world where survival depends on one hidden lock combination. Alara wonders if there is anything special inside the heavy iron safe. He tells her it is mostly carriage keys, but they are hunting for a crate with a flintlock pistol inside. He explains it was meant for self-defense against sudden bandit raids or monster attacks. After that, he hands the heavy crate to his partner and tells her to guard it. Alara refuses because she has never fired a weapon, so he nods in understanding. Right then, Julian shows her some brass keys he found, making her curious about what they unlock. He thinks they belong to the staff quarters. They head to the room and the lock clicks right open. Inside, they find an undead hunched on the floor, but Alara realizes the creature is already long dead. Eventually, they collapse onto a bed together, and she feels an incredible sense of relief and comfort. She jokes about stealing the blankets if they move, but he wonders if that is even possible. She says their rations were low anyway, so their packs had space. She tells him to sleep since they have been running all day. In the dead of night, Julian wakes up. Thinking about their vanishing food, he decides they must reach the grand warehouse as fast as they can. Glancing at the winter gear, he knows the biting cold is going to be their next nightmare. Things below ground are rotting, and if everything fails, they must fight across the frozen surface. He realizes he can finally afford new clothes for them. Now pay attention here. This is where Julian finally makes a heavy choice that changes their entire dangerous journey. He notices an upgrade is available. By morning, Alara is shaken awake by him. He tells her they must move out immediately. On the iron tracks, they find carriages flipped over, looking like someone did it on purpose. She climbs atop a wagon to scout and sees a massive wall of undead on the other side. Alara rushes back, terrified, saying there are hundreds of those monsters waiting for them. Julian suggests finding another way, but she explains this path is the only track connecting to where they need to go. They sit to talk calmly, weighing the risk of traveling across the frozen surface. But they realize the wind would carry their scent to the monsters. He suggests searching again for anything they missed. While his partner is distracted, he opens a hidden skill called Explorer. This rare skill lets him purchase ancient items not found in regular shops. He decides to search for a cure first, but nothing comes up, meaning the skill stays ready for something else. He tries searching for antibodies or viral cures, but the screen remains blank. It is frustrating, but at least he tried. Suddenly, he searches for a scent masker, and it actually appears. Seeing it only lasts 90 minutes, he realizes he will need 3 bottles since their journey is at least 4 hours long. I know what you're thinking, losing all those hard-earned savings in one go. That really hurts. He returns to 𝑭𝒓𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏, claiming he found the masking oil in some old bags on the platform. She asks if it truly hides their scent. He says worst case, they just have to run. After spraying themselves down with the oil, they finally head out. Julian warns her to keep pace because things are about to get dangerous. Soon, they spot an undead. They both wonder if the masking oil is even working. The monster turns toward them and they brace for a fight, but it just wanders past. 𝑭𝒓𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏 is thrilled it actually worked. He says this will change everything. Soon, she spots an untouched armory up ahead. But Julian warns against it, saying anyone still inside that shop is likely heavily armed. They find a weathered sign, showing they are near the south post. Julian is disappointed they are still so far from the Iron Fort. Due to the delay, they split up to find a place to sleep. 𝑭𝒓𝒏 finds only broken windows. Meanwhile, the man only finds locked doors filled with monsters. They meet back up, both empty-handed and without a safe place to rest. He says they need a place free of monsters that is still sealed tight. Then they spot a tavern door and go to check it. 𝑭𝒓𝒏 says the area looks clear of any lurking monsters. She tries the handle, but it is locked. She suggests breaking the glass, but he thinks that is a mistake. Shouting could draw the horde. He steps back, convinced there is a secret way inside. And that is where we leave them. Trust me, you and I are going to love his next move. All right, you and I are starting where every hidden spare key could mean life or death for our heroes. Inside, they find heavy sacks of grain. Sienna wonders what to do, but he says they must stay. They're far too heavy. Julian notes they'll reach the main Citadel storehouse by noon the very next day. Looking worried, she asks if other survivors might already be occupying the keep like at the armory. He says the risk is high. Sienna suggests a secret code in case one of them falls into a trap. They decide that speaking casually will be their secret signal if they ever find a crossbow. Julian suggests formal speech for blades. They keep refining their signals so their secret codes sound like a perfectly normal conversation between two weary travelers. Suddenly, a flash of lightning splits the sky. And they're stunned. Lightning during a blizzard. Julian warns the snow will pile high, making their trek to the storehouse even more grueling tomorrow. With that, she decides it's time to find some rest. Later, Julian wakes to a strange roar. Outside, a lone rider on an iron steed tears through the frozen streets. Julian wonders why anyone would be out in the dead of this frozen night. Now, watch closely. He just can't believe the rider is heading for their storehouse. Then, a massive horde of walkers appears. Sienna wakes up in shock. He explains the noise from that iron steed must have drawn them in. Their path is now crawling with monsters. Frustrated, she asks what their next move is going to be. Julian suspects the rider might be leading the massive horde toward a specific target on purpose. But she notes they're out of rations. They can't just wait for the undead to wander away. He searches the news scrolls for info. People are whispering about the strange, thundering snow, while others mention a fabled shelter way out on Dragon's Reach Isle. Yet, many claim it's a trap run by a dangerous, fanatical cult. Others guess the sanctuary is just a ploy to rob survivors. Sienna sighs, noting how dark the world's become. He remembers Hugh saying he'd head for the western coast. If they can find him, they might get real answers. Julian tells his friend to ignore the rumors, and she firmly agrees. And honestly, you and I know they're sticking to the original plan for the storehouse, though they'll turn back if things get too risky. They use the last of their scent-masking herbs, knowing they have to move incredibly fast. Thankfully, the streets are surprisingly clear of walkers. Sienna whispers that the storehouse must finally be close. He warns the mist is blinding them. Their scent masker is failing too, so if they hit a walker, it's a fight to the death. Moments later, she finally spots their goal. Julian's relieved by the towering walls. It's perfect for defense. But when Sienna tries the heavy gates, they won't budge. She realizes that wicked barbed wire was added recently. The two scout the perimeter for a weakness, eventually finding a section of the wall that looks much less sturdy. Sienna prepares to scale it immediately, but Julian warns her it's a gamble since they have no idea what's waiting inside. She argues they have no choice. Their repellent is gone and they need a safe place now. Julian yields, but tells her to be wary of any dangerous men on the other side. She takes a sprinting start, using his strength to launch herself up and over the cold stone wall. She scans the interior before dropping down, unaware that a shadow is already tracking her every move. Sienna lands, but before she can even breathe, someone suddenly seizes her. "Hands up!" they bark, searching her only to find she's completely unarmed. The stranger demands to know where her partner is. Cornered, she admits he's just outside the wall. The man orders her to tell her friend to come to the front gate. She shouts for Julian to come forward, and he instantly realizes something is wrong. Hearing her coded speech, Julian realizes there's only one captor, and that man is currently holding a loaded pistol. He draws his own sidearm and calls out that he's heading for the gate as ordered. The kidnapper yells for him to drop his gear and emerge. Julian claims he only has a spear for protection and tosses it to the dirt. He frantically plans his next move. His hidden weapon lacks range, so he needs to close the gap without being seen. Julian tells the captor to release his friend since he complied. The man shoves her forward, and Julian knows this is his only golden chance to strike. "Trust me, you and I watch as Julian lunges forward." Alistair aims his crossbow as Sienna dives. Bolts fly, but you and I see that no one is hit. The rogue is blinded by the flash, firing wildly. Sienna moves like lightning and pins him down. The captive screams curses at them, so Alistair tosses Sienna some rope to bind him tight. Alistair hears a noise. Is it an enemy? No, it is a horde of whites drawn by the noise. He shouts for Sienna to grab the keys, but the kidnapper won't budge. Time is running out fast. Sienna has had enough and kicks the man until he yields. Finally, she has the iron keys in hand. While she fumbles with the lock, Alistair is fighting a desperate battle for survival against the dead. A white lunges, but he crushes its skull. Now watch this. His spear gets stuck in the monster, leaving him completely defenseless as a second white attacks. With 0 options left, he abandons his weapon and rolls desperately to the side. He is grounded and exposed, but just then, the heavy gate swings open, smashing a white face in. Sienna signals him inside. Alistair sprints through and she slams the gate shut, locking the monsters out. Safe at last, they catch their breath. Alistair suggests they move deeper into the storehouse immediately. Sienna glances at their prisoner, wondering what they should do with the miserable man. Alistair tells her to bring him. As he helps the man up, he realizes it is his old friend, Julian. Inside the granary, Sienna admits she didn't expect to meet someone Alistair knew. Alistair tells Julian not to rub his eyes with the cloth, and Julian says he understands. Still, it burns fiercely. Julian sighs, admitting it was his own fault for attacking them both first. Alistair thanks him for his understanding. Soon, the former steward offers them warm tea, and they accept greedily. Julian says he's been here 3 days. He came here to fix the enchanted sunstones for power. He was busy installing them on the outer walls when that rogue suddenly showed up. The lower windows were useless for light, so he had to move the stones to the high roof. He was looking for a way to shield the stones from the frost with glass, and luckily, there are tons of spare materials around here to work with. Alistair asks if the storehouse is actually well stocked for a long siege. Julian says construction tools are plenty, but as for the food, that is a different story. Sienna asks if the larder is in the second wing, and Julian nods grimly. The roof collapsed under the weight of the snow, but since everything was frozen solid, the food remained perfectly fine. He saved whatever he possibly could from that area. Once the power returns to the sunstones, they can recover all the supplies with the equipment. Finally, Alistair asks if Julian is truly comfortable with them staying there as guests. You and I both know that in a world like this, finding loyal allies is the only way to survive. Alistair admits he was actually about to ask the same thing because he cannot defend this massive fortress all alone. More raiders will surely come to this storehouse, and if he is alone, he will eventually break. This is the perfect time to unite with someone he trusts. Outside, they hear the undead scratching at the iron entrance. Alistair asks where he got the crossbow. Julian took it from a fallen knight who had ended his life. Are there bolts left? Julian shakes his head. He used the last of them at the gate. Sienna notes that the wights outside will at least act as a guard against other humans. Suddenly, Alistair's stomach growls loudly. Embarrassed, he begins preparing some hot broth for his new guests. The two of them light up at the sight of food, but Alistair warns them it needs more time. To celebrate, Sienna grabs the ale they stashed away earlier. Once the meal is served, Alistair gets truly emotional as he takes his very first bite of food. Sienna sighs, claiming the hot broth is reaching down into her very soul. Alistair stands and calls for a toast. The three of them celebrate their new, unlikely brotherhood. Alistair jokes that he had forgotten what it feels like to be full. It feels amazing to have hot food and a place to rest, yet they are still suffering from the cold. Sienna remembers the building has a central hearth system for heat. But Julian says it is broken. Alistair asks if there is anything left to burn for heat. Julian mentions an old iron brazier, but he has searched the entire storehouse and failed to find any dry wood to burn. Alistair asks if there is any fuel left. The two of them begin debating what furniture they could sacrifice to the flames. Sienna points to the woods, and trust me, you and I are definitely going to want to see what happens next in this story. You and I are following Arthur downstairs. John points out the supplies on the first floor, like spoons and soap. Finally, John can actually brush his teeth again. Small wins, right? He tells his friend they are set for the kitchen too. Pots, kettles, the whole lot. No more scrounging for basics. Up on the 5th floor, the stockroom is just office supplies. Pencils and pens are bloody useless in this world. Looking at Arthur's thin shirt, John asks about the winter gear. Arthur says there is a mountain of coats waiting once they grab the brazier. Then the bloke in glasses moans about his massive shoes. He has had to stuff them with layers of socks just to keep them on. Hearing that, Arthur opens his magical inventory and buys a sturdy pair of boots for the man. He hands them over for a fitting. They are a perfect match. Just like that, John is officially part of Arthur's noble squad for good. Finally, they find their prize, the brazier. The two men grab a side each and begin hauling it through the halls. Halfway back, Arthur remembers just how much John loves a smoke. Arthur sets the load down with a smirk. He mentions the warehouse is missing one vital thing, leaving John completely baffled. Arthur pulls out a fresh pack and hands him some cigarettes as thanks for the ramen they shared earlier. John gets all choked up and goes for a hug, but Arthur tells him to quit the weird stuff immediately. Back at camp, Arthur shows off their loot, heavy winter coats, face soap, and even some toothbrushes. It is like Christmas in the apocalypse. Sarah's over the moon. For the next 3 days, the squad builds up the outpost, setting up a kitchen and a proper place for their mattresses to stay dry. However, they could not fit the solar panels. The weather was too rough, and they did not want the glass smashing. So they played it safe, moving the panels to a sheltered open spot on the 5th floor. As time ticks by, the undead begin to scatter. Arthur decides it is finally time to scout the outside world. Arthur has that old gun shop on his mind. Sarah agrees, but warns him it is a suicide mission to go that far. He knows she is right. They are low on coins and do not have enough protection against a massive horde of shamblers. Now pay attention, because this is where everything starts to spiral out of control. Shamblers swarm a poor bloke on a bicycle. Desperate, he sprints up a stone staircase where the monsters cannot reach him. Initially, people thought that biker was just fleeing, but the bastard was actually herding the undead right toward survivor camps. The locals know he is a villain for leading that horde. Meanwhile, with the base secure, our group splits up for their duties. Sarah takes command of the interior, meticulously sorting through the inventory in the storage room. John handles the intel from the scouts and keeps the machinery running, fixing up all their gear. John checks in with Sarah, admitting the generators being a right pain and he's stuck. She asks him to help sort the kitchen stock instead. While they work, you and I are watching Arthur patrol the halls. He meets the others in the stores. John explains the weather is too miserable to even try starting the generator. Arthur expected that. The fog outside is thick as soup, making it impossible to see more than a few feet. John notes it has been ages since they scouted. Soon after, he is at the gates, bundled in winter gear with his bike. He asks why everyone is staring at him like he has grown a second head. Sarah is worried about him going solo, but John insists they need to stay and defend the citadel from any raiders. Besides, he has got his trusty spear and skills. He hops on his bike, swearing to return with a stove and more weapons for the group. John has already rigged up ropes to secure the stove to Arthur's heavy backpack. Arthur thanks him and pedals out. One last time, Sarah begs him to turn back if things get hairy. As he pedals down the deserted street, Arthur thinks about how lucky he is to have Sarah as an ally. Still, he keeps his guard up. The apartment complex ahead is definitely going to be crawling with the undead. He reaches the local school and knows he is almost at his goal. The wind picks up, blowing his scent away from the monsters. But suddenly, Arthur catches the sharp, unmistakable smell of engine exhaust nearby. A motorcycle roars to life. Then, a massive wall of shamblers erupts right in front of him. It is him, the same biker who was hurting the undead earlier. Absolute nightmare. Arthur pedals like a madman, but the snow chains are slowing him down. He needs cover, so he breaks for the school. The door is locked tight. Stick around, because Arthur is about to find himself in a real corner. All right, you and I are about to see if Julian survives this ghoul grabbing his leg. He tries to kick the undead beast loose, but its cold grip on his foot is like iron. Julian yanks his spear and skewers the monster's skull, finally freeing his leg as he falls back on the floor, though the creature is still moving. He slams the heavy window shut just in time, collapsing as he gasps about how death nearly took his soul today. Sarah is pacing with anxiety, and Lord Silas asks if she is finally losing her nerve. She hates the gloom, so Silas suggests they consult the scrying stone, which he managed to charge up to 8% mana. Sarah is curious and wants to know what the latest reports are across the magical network of survivors. The word online is terrifying. It seems these rotwalkers can now track the scent of living blood from miles away. Silas walks into a room that seems safe, but looking out the tower window reveals a massive horde of undead, led by the same dark rider as last time. One monstrosity catches his eye because it stands over 2 meters tall and looks stronger than the others. Reading about the monsters changing, Silas realizes that things are becoming far more dangerous for everyone in the kingdom. Now watch this. Things are about to get intense as they realize the horde is heading straight for East Hampton. Sarah panics because her squire is there, but Silas grabs her arm, demanding to know where she thinks she is going. She cries that at this rate, Sir Julian is going to run straight into that horde, and if he runs into them, there won't even be anything left to find. She turns to leave the stone warehouse to find him, but the man tells her it is already too late. Sarah stops in her tracks and asks him exactly what he means by such a grim statement. Silas explains the warning arrived hours ago, and by now the tide of death has likely already swallowed the entire town. He says their priority is to fortify the warehouse doors, so Sarah vows she will do whatever it takes to protect their stronghold. Back at the academy, Julian hears a noise next door and wonders if it might be another survivor he can team up with. But when he opens the door, he finds a zombified child waiting for him in the shadows of the room. He draws the monster's attention and takes it out with a single, clean strike from his silver-tipped spear. With tears in his eyes, Julian whispers an apology before moving through the empty, silent halls of the old building. He finds a corner to rest, praying the rain and the ghouls will finally be gone by the next morning. Julian huddles in his furs, wondering if the warehouse is safe since the horde moved toward the northern valley. Eventually, he wakes up to a miracle. There are no longer any undead monsters wandering around outside in the courtyard. He scouts the nearby barracks and finds it ransacked, but manages to salvage a few baseball bats to use as weapons. In the larder, he finds a lone ghoul, kills it easily, and claims another shimmering soul coin for his pouch. Julian finds a cooking stove nearby, but unfortunately, it is not an enchanted induction one. He thinks about how nice a forge would be, but it'd be too heavy to haul, so he decides to head for the city. You and I both know this is a huge gamble, as he mounts his bike and rides toward the city. The spire of a high stone tower catches his eye, and he decides to head straight for that location. Glass shards litter the entrance, signs of a past struggle, but Julian feels relieved because the interior seems strangely secure. Torch in hand, he climbs the stairs but worries that forcing the upper door might alert an alarm. Julian pulls out his heavy warhammer and smashes the iron lock from the inside with one powerful, crushing blow. The room is a wreck, but he is ecstatic because he has finally found a working induction stove. He dismantles it for travel and realizes it has been an eternity since he last slept in a real bed. But just as he is about to drift off into sleep, he starts hearing strange, scratching noises outside his room. He looks out and sees ghouls scaling the walls of the nearby building, clearly hunting for a very specific reason. A person is trapped there, and Julian knows this is bad news since the entire swarm is now gathering together. He knows he cannot help, and this distraction is actually his perfect chance to escape the area while they are busy. Suddenly, a gun goes off. It turns out the girl in the building across the way is fighting back. He curses, knowing that all of that noise is going to attract every monster from miles around to their location. Terror strikes him deep, because he realizes he is now basically trapped inside his hiding spot by the swarm. For an hour, she shoots with lethal precision, making Julian wonder if she is actually some kind of elite soldier. So what do you and I think? Is Julian going to find an ally or a rival in this mess? All right, you and I are about to see if a desperate team-up is a genius move or a death sentence. Arthur gets tired of just watching and decides to wait, because it'll take at least a day for the zombies to clear out. But after a while, the protagonist wakes up to find a massive horde of undead still blocking his path. The girl stopped shooting, but supplies are dangerously low. He regrets not leaving sooner because now all he can do is wait. Right after that, he's tossing and turning in bed, unable to sleep since the zombies are heading toward the warehouse. To distract himself, he starts digging around the shop. He ends up finding some random mystery box that costs 10 coins. He needs to know what's inside to see if it's worth buying, but he's broke. Suddenly, a massive explosion rocks the area, and the guy has no idea what's going on. Arthur notices the zombies are moving south. Seeing that, he decides to use this chance to finally get out of there. So he straps his stove onto the bike and heads out carefully, but right at the entrance, he runs into several undead. He wonders how he's supposed to take these monsters out when he sees the girl from the other building trying to leave too. Now, don't blink, because this mysterious girl is about to make her move. The blonde charges forward, and a zombie crosses her path, but she drops it with a single shot from her rifle. Arthur is stunned by how she moves and wonders if she's actually part of some special forces unit. Then she reaches him and says she's not interested in fighting. Still, the guy stays uneasy because she won't lower her weapon. Right after that, she asks if he has anyone with him. With a gun hidden behind his back, Arthur says he's alone and that he doesn't want to fight either. Then they swap names, and the girl says her name is Sarah. She warns him there isn't much stuff left around that apartment complex. While they're sitting there resting, she asks if he's been living alone. Arthur decides to lie for now since he doesn't know if he can trust her. Then he asks her the same thing. Sarah says she had a few military teammates with her, but they all died. After that, she explains they had a base near Highland, but a massive horde wiped them out. She gets irritated, saying the whole mess was actually that biker's fault. Then she asks if he's got any destination in mind. He says the gun shop, because nothing beats having something to protect yourself in this world. She asks if he knows how to shoot, and he says yes. Hearing that, Sarah hands her new partner a heavy gun. He asks if she's sure it's okay for him to keep it. She says it's fine since she has plenty. Arthur thanks her and says that's more than enough. Now that he's got weapons, he gets curious what his next goal is. He lies again, saying he's going to look for a safe place to settle. After hearing that, she suggests he come with her since it'll be better if they team up. Arthur figures she just doesn't want to be alone, so he decides to use this chance to see if she's someone he can actually trust. After that, he starts following her as she takes out zombies along the way. Watching her, he thinks he really wouldn't want her as an enemy. After a while, they make it to the West District pretty quickly, thanks to her escorting him. Then, Arthur suggests they stop walking for a bit and take a break. Sitting in a restaurant, they chat about grabbing something sweet to get their energy back. After that, she says finding food should be their top priority. The main guy agrees, but before they can keep talking about it. You saw that coming, right? Gunfire erupts and Sarah fires back like she knows exactly who these shooters are. Seeing that, Arthur starts wondering if these enemies have some kind of personal grudge against her. He runs up to her and asks what's going on, but she stays silent. It turns out the shooters are soldiers, and they tell someone named Alina to surrender or die. She doesn't stop firing, and the guy tells her to stop, because she's going to attract a massive zombie horde. Sarah says she'll never surrender because she can't go back to that place. Then she says those men did horrific things to her body, which completely shocks him. Arthur starts wondering if he can really trust her and what he's supposed to do. Suddenly, she grabs him and throws him in front of the bullets, saying she'll surrender. Luckily, the shots miss him. Trying to protect himself, he drops to the ground and says he doesn't want to fight. One of the soldiers signals the others to stop shooting. Sarah sees the opening and tries to run, but she gets shot in the arm. Even injured, she keeps going and some soldiers chase after her. Other men come up to Arthur and ask if he speaks their language, and he says yes. So what do you and I take from this? Captain Miller asks if he's Alina's partner, but Arthur says he doesn't even know who that woman is. Stick with me, let's see if this alliance holds. Jackson explains they met hours ago and decided to travel as loyal allies. He also mentions that Alara told him those men committed horrific crimes against her. Hearing that, the knights are stunned because they claim she betrayed them, stole their rations, and even murdered one of their own. Now Jackson is stuck, not knowing which side is telling the truth. The scouts who hunted Alara report back, saying they lost her when the noise drew a massive swarm of ghouls. Commander Brand asks about the numbers, and his men say there were enough to stall them for hours. Brand trusts Jackson, who gives his thanks. Then the soldiers find Jackson's horse and notice the saddlebags are suspiciously heavy. Jackson panics, fearing he will lose his gear, so he steps forward and claims the pack is his. Pay attention, because things get intense. One knight glares, finding a stolen sword in the pack. Jackson worries they won't return his belongings, but Brand hands him the pack, hoping he won't use the contents for evil. The soldiers depart, expressing hope that their paths might cross again one day. Jackson prepares to head home, but realizes his steed was wounded during the skirmish. He grabs his portable lantern and starts trekking through the freezing snowstorm on foot. He considers buying protective charms, since there is still 1.5 kilometers left to reach the keep. Checking his pouch, Jackson finds 16 gold pieces and has no idea how he earned them. He suspects they came from Alara's kills. It is strange, though, as he never received word that they were officially bonded in a party. The system only recognizes Serafina and Julian as allies, implying ghouls must have died back at the keep. Trust me, you're going to want to see this sprint. Jackson races back to the keep, praying he isn't too late. Meanwhile, a massive horde of the undead gathers at the gates of the manor. Serafina and Julian try to hold the line. Suddenly, the creatures snap the gate chains, throwing the young man backward. She grabs her comrade and suggests retreating inside the manor, as the main entrance is lost. Reaching the stairs, she draws her blade, vowing to fight if the monsters breach the inner halls. Julian notes that even if ghouls cannot climb, they can still crawl up the embankments. She argues they can survive if they keep the undead funneled into a narrow choke point. Seeing her teammate still lacks a weapon, 𝒓𝒏 tells him to take position, but Julian suggests they simply abandon the post and flee. He starts down the steps, but she reminds him they swore to defend the keep until Jackson returned. He clarifies he was not deserting his friend. He simply wanted to escape first and regroup later. She refuses to budge, declaring she is staying at the base no matter what happens. She releases him, telling him to stop thinking of flight and grab a weapon. He hesitates, then decides to stand his ground. Suddenly, 𝒓𝒏 hears a noise, looks out the window, and spots a rider approaching. The figure feels strangely familiar. The rider lifts his visor, and she is shocked to see Jackson's face. Just then, the ghouls shatter the remaining chains and swarm into the manor courtyard. Luckily, the inner door is heavy reinforced glass. Still, the two prepare for battle, knowing it will soon break. Meanwhile, Jackson strikes down a lone ghoul near the base, hoping it is just a straggler. He rushes toward the keep and finds the entrance destroyed. He refuses to believe his friends are gone. Inside, the undead breach the glass. 𝒓𝒏 fights them off, but her strength is fading fast. Jackson reaches the threshold and freezes at the sight of ghoul corpses littered everywhere. He finds his friends' personal belongings, realizing they stayed to fight instead of running. Panic sets in as he calls their names with no reply. He reaches a chamber the undead failed to penetrate. He fears the worst but refuses to believe it. Suddenly, a voice calls his name, and his friends appear safe and sound. At long last, the three of them are reunited. Once safe, 𝒓𝒏 explains the reinforced door held, so they came up with a plan to create a small opening to fight from. Thanks to that strategy, they defended the manor easily, and Jackson even let his inner hero shine through. Once enough corpses piled up, the other ghouls couldn't enter. They sealed the door, and the monsters eventually wandered off. "You and I saw it, loyalty wins." Jackson asks what they did. You and I listen as Alina explains the castle gate broke, and they grabbed supplies to fix it, earning them Arthur's praise for their hard work. Lord Arthur finally smiles, having finally secured the rare mana stones needed to build a new power core for the manor's defenses. Alina starts praising his brilliance, and it goes straight to his head as he reveals a legendary enchanted blade he finally found. The knights are stunned, wondering where he found a legendary weapon with such raw magical power. He tells them they won't believe the story. Soon, the group gathers around the hearth to roast some fresh wild boar meat. Arthur asks about the feast, and Sir Gareth pulls out enough meat to feed an entire battalion for the cold night. The smell of roasting meat is enough to drive anyone mad. Once it's finally ready, each man grabs his piece and takes the first bite. Everyone is ecstatic because after days of hunger, this feast tastes like absolute heaven for the weary survivors. Once they're stuffed, Alina admits there's a strange peace in not dealing with royal court politics anymore, and she honestly doesn't know if they will ever return to their old noble lives. Arthur asks if she's gone mad, because obviously they intend to reclaim their titles and return home. He sighs, saying the only thing missing to make this perfect is a cold mug of northern ale. Arthur promises to raid a cellar soon. Suddenly, Gareth mentions the rogue knight from earlier, noting Alina saw his face clearly. She says his face was familiar, reminding her of the chaos during her squire training days back at the capital. There were 16 squires instead of 15. That extra boy, Cedric, was the Duke's spoiled son who used his name to get in. Now watch this. Arthur realized the psycho leading the undead horde on a skeletal steed was someone from their old noble circle. But Sir Gareth shakes his head, insisting it couldn't possibly be that same man they once knew. Arthur is confused, so Gareth explains that Cedric actually has an identical twin brother with a very different soul. Cedric was a degenerate creep, always involved in dark scandals. While they looked the same, their personalities and actions were worlds apart. Meanwhile, his brother Alaric was a disciplined genius. He even mastered high sorcery abroad and earned a title from the Grand Academy. Alaric returned home after his studies to serve the crown, but that was the very last time he was seen. That was the last time anyone in the kingdom ever heard from him. Arthur thinks they saw the older twin, but can't rule out Alaric, whose genius might be behind this entire plague since he once served the Duke's house and seems heavily involved in all this mess. Still, the others brush that dark theory off for now. Arthur asks if she is certain about the face. She nods firmly, so he decides they must keep this secret within the circle for now. Later, Arthur shares a disturbing report brought in by a messenger bird regarding the sanctuary they once hoped to find. It reveals the truth about the Western Citadel. The same fortress the trio already suspected was hiding something truly sinister. Scrying scrolls prove it is run by a forbidden sect. Their name literally translates to the bringers of the final eclipse. It looks like they used the chaos to seize the royal port, which has massive fortifications, making it far more livable than they had ever expected before. You and I wonder if Arthur should be paying much closer attention to this. Gareth warns against clashing with religious fanatics, as their blind devotion makes them the most dangerous enemies in the realm. Understanding the risk, Gareth promises to only bring the most vital information back to Arthur while they stay hidden. By morning, Arthur inspects the mangled castle gate. Seeing the damage, he knows they must fortify it before the next raid. He insists they work in total silence. The two men begin the grueling process of making the necessary repairs. 6 hours later, Arthur collapses in the dirt, completely drained from the back-breaking labor of reinforcing the heavy wood. Arthur says the gate repair is finished. Elena also says adding a secondary iron portcullis was a brilliant tactical upgrade. Arthur tells her to get inside as the cold bites. She asks if he finished his work on the machine. Inside the armory, they find a mechanical device designed to convert physical labor into mana for the manor's lights. He placed it near the window for a view. It works through kinetic motion that fuels the manor's ancient mana crystals. Arthur looks at the gears and asks for an explanation in words a simple knight can understand. Gareth admits the efficiency is poor. He says if someone labors for an hour to power a device, it only runs for 15 minutes. However, 30 minutes of effort is enough to fully imbue a communication stone with magical power. Elena is impressed. Having another source of power besides ancient sun magic gives them a massive advantage. Gareth thanks him because their survival base now has a much more stable supply of energy for the winter. That night, Arthur stares out the window, wishing he could find a legendary artifact to better protect his people and home. He spends a rare coin on his search skill, but finds nothing. Trust me, you and I are left wanting more. All right, you and I are watching Julian hunt for weapons, but he fails. Then he finds a magic location tracker. It is a 24-hour location tracker that costs 7 coins. Julian is stunned because this allows him to track targets or find lost allies, so he buys it immediately. Suddenly, Julian rushes in, shouting for his friends to wake up. Seconds later, the trio is ready to fight. Elena gets nervous because she has never fired a crossbow before. Julian calms her down, saying, just aim and shoot. After that, Julian tells her there is no need to shoot if these strangers are being reasonable. Despite her nerves, she nods. Julian signals her to watch carefully, then peeks through a crack to see 2 figures. One looks like a child. Elena notes it is just 2 people with no sign of anyone else hiding nearby. The main character aims his weapon and orders them to stop. It is an old man and a girl. Julian demands they identify themselves, and the man says he is just a weak traveler with his granddaughter. Silas gets curious about where they actually wandered from. The elder explains they have been wandering with no home, running from monsters, and their last village was totally destroyed. Right then, the man begs for help since his only way to defend her is a rusted axe. Elena asks if more are coming, but he says they are alone. Julian tells her to hide and watch. Julian opens the first gate and tells them to enter slowly. He makes them wait between the two gates. The girl asks why they cannot just let them in, since it is just an elder and a kid. Now pay attention here. Julian knows even the kindest face can turn deadly in a world this truly broken. The two start arguing back and forth about whether to let two total strangers into their sanctuary. Julian realizes neither of them is wrong, but he still feels like letting them in is the right call. He makes it clear he understands the risks, but they desperately need to increase their numbers to survive. Silas adds that the elder looks sturdy for labor, and the child could help with guard duty in the courtyard. They search the old man's pack at the gate, and Julian finds absolutely nothing suspicious inside. So Julian welcomes them in, and they bow low, thanking the group for showing them such kindness. Once inside the hall, Julian asks when they last ate, and the old man admits it has been 10 days. Silas cooks up some warm rations for the pair. After filling her belly, the little girl falls asleep, and Clara just cannot stop admiring how adorable she is. Then Julian gets curious about how an old man and a girl managed to make it this far. The man explains he was a hunter in the northern wilds, mostly tracking and killing mountain boars. You and I both see it now. This isn't just an ordinary old man, he's a survivor. After hearing his struggle, Alina gets emotional, realizing how much pain they have truly endured. The main character stands up, sensing no lies. He offers his hand and tells them they can stay. The elder looks stunned, because he fully expected to be thrown back out into the cold at dawn. With a warm smile, Julian says they must stick together to survive. The man promises to work his hardest. He even jokes they can give him any task, because he is still strong despite his age. Even so, they let him rest for a day, while secretly keeping a close eye on them to ensure they were trustworthy. On day 36 of their survival, the elder says he is ready to work. Julian tells the girl to play nearby to keep her busy. Later, the main character heads into the forest with the elder to gather some much-needed firewood. The man gets ready to chop a tree, but the young guy stops him right there. He explains that the sound of an axe would draw monsters or alert other dangerous survivors to their home. Julian says they will just gather fallen branches instead, and the old man apologizes for the near mistake. After a while, their packs are finally stuffed to the brim with dry wood. While working, the old man mentions Julian has clearly seen a lot. He adds his granddaughter lost her parents too. Julian says, at least the little girl still has her grandfather watching over her. The man agrees and says that is exactly why he has to live as long as possible for her. Trust me, you and I will see him through. All right, you and I are back with Julian, who realizes Barnaby is actually a noble and responsible man. Back at the manor, Barnaby rushes to his granddaughter, claiming he practiced his writing for a full hour. Julian tells Simon that his long talk with the old man in the woods proved they could truly trust him. Then he asks Simon about giving the old man a heavy crossbow, as the veteran knight clearly knows his way around a weapon. Julian agrees with the plan. Meanwhile, the young girl thinks her grandfather's hat looks strange since it is different than before. Julian had gifted Barnaby that hat in the forest, hoping to officially recruit him into their small fellowship. The old knight initially refuses the gift, but Julian insists this new one is far warmer for the harsh winter ahead. So the knight accepts the gift and thanks him. Suddenly, a magical message confirms a new member joined the fellowship, but merchant prices will be adjusted. Checking the magical shop, Julian sees that every single item now costs 1 extra gold coin. Back in the present, Julian feels physically ill just thinking about that massive price hike. His friend grows concerned, but Julian claims he is simply exhausted. That night, he takes a closer look at the merchant's shop and realizes it is twisted. Here's the thing you and I need to realize. He can't just keep adding people to the group like it's nothing. He grumbles about the price of the mystery treasure box being higher, but he decides to buy it anyway. The box yields a secret parchment, and Julian wonders if this scrap of paper is really worth 11 gold pieces. However, As he reads the contents, he realizes the information inside is actually a total game changer. He begins to panic, because if the information in this document is true, thousands of innocent people are going to die very soon. The scroll holds 3 secrets. The first 2 are useless now, but the third one is an absolute nightmare. A deadly blizzard is coming in exactly 2 weeks. The next morning, Julian wakes up to see Simon running around like a madman. Still half asleep from his late-night research, Julian struggles to find his focus. He asks Sonia what the chaos is about, and she explains a wild boar appeared during the dark night. Julian panics, thinking the beast somehow breached the manor walls. But Sonia calmly explains it got tangled in the iron wire. Simon spotted it, and Barnaby confirmed the kill. Outside, the old knight even took down a few undead, earning 2 gold pieces for his bravery. At breakfast, Simon suggests building an internal defense tower, since they can't risk another breach happening so easily in the future. Julian agrees, knowing they need a way to stop anything trying to scale their stone walls. Simon, ever the strategist, plans to construct something like a massive medieval siege tower. Julian asks if he is certain because it sounds far too complex, but Simon insists he has a foolproof plan. After finishing their meal, Julian tells the group they must stockpile food immediately, but he keeps the secret of the blizzard to himself for now. While Simon and Sonia hunt for food, Julian and Barnaby head deep into the woods for firewood. The 2 men decide to venture further into the thickets to find the best branches. Soon enough, Barnaby's pack is overflowing. Julian suggests they make a second trip to carry the rest back. Now pay attention. A strange sound echoes, and they realize they aren't the only ones in these woods. They draw their steel just as a lone deer steps out from the shadows. Barnaby is shocked, as seeing any animal survive this freezing hunger is rare. Julian realizes he hasn't seen any animals since this disaster began. Suddenly, the deer starts staring at them in a very strange way before charging straight at them. The old knight shouts for Julian to move back, as he steps forward to handle it. He thrusts his spear deep into the beast, using a tree to brace himself until the deer finally drops to the ground. Barnaby notes the deer is surprisingly well fed, despite the entire kingdom being frozen over and dying. He catches his breath, warning Julian that the deer wasn't actually the real source of the noise they heard earlier. Julian freezes in fear, wondering what kind of monster could be lurking nearby in the shadows. They decide to abandon the carcass and retreat. Back home, Julian admits the total lack of wildlife since the apocalypse started is truly suspicious. Sonia asks what he thinks is really going on. Julian has a dark theory, but sharing his unconfirmed fears would only spread more panic among the survivors. He stays silent, watching the magical guild board as people plan their travels, while his companion continues his grueling work of peddling the mechanism. You and I have to wonder, are people really still this oblivious to the coming storm? All right, you and I are about to see how lonely this frozen kingdom truly feels for our survivors. Later, Arthur mentions, the message stones are really just a place for travelers to share a little hope. Julian stops his trek as Arthur notes the network has been buzzing lately, with more refugees joining the chatter. The young lord agrees, knowing everyone is just fighting to stay alive in their own corners. Right after that, Julian gets curious if these reports are truly secret, since names have coded seals attached. Arthur explains those are just temporal markers that vanish every 24 hours, though some travelers use special sigils instead. Hearing that, Julian thinks he might be able to trade valuable intel for much-needed supplies on the site. Soon, Julian returns to the woods with Barrett. The veteran asks if this is where they left the buck. The elder confirms it, but they both find it unsettling because the carcass has completely vanished from the glade. Silas notices there are not even any blood stains on the frozen dirt. Barrett is certain it did not snow, leaving Julian baffled by how every trace of the beast just disappeared. Seconds later, they find a rabbit on the path, barely breathing. Its mangled legs show it is still barely alive. Checking the wounds, they realize the creature is turning blighted, falling to the same curse as the humans. Now watch this part carefully. Reports say animals are turning just by eating the flesh of the fallen. Just to be safe, Julian decides that the manor should avoid eating any meat for the time being. Silas finds it strange, since rabbits are herbivores, asking if creatures are now rising as the undead just like them. Silas points out they still have not seen a beast fully consumed by the plague. Julian admits he has no answers, but warns them to stay clear of any wildlife for now. Suddenly, Barrett enters the room needing to talk with Julian. The veteran explains they must fell fresh timber because there are no more dry branches on the ground. Silas realizes they are running dangerously low on firewood too. Julian says they have no choice and tells his companion to sharpen the heavy wood axe for the task. But first he asks if Arthur can craft a silent weapon, even though Julian already carries a heavy hand cannon. He needs something quiet to avoid attracting a horde of ghouls, so Silas suggests building a heavy arbalist. Silas says that just because his friend is a scholar does not mean he can craft everything, and Barrett admits the task is impossible. Julian sighs and admits that building a complex crossbow is likely an impossible dream for them. But Arthur shocks them by saying it is actually possible. He reveals he was an engineer obsessed with medieval siege engines and once built a functioning arbalist during his college years. He can forge it, but it will take time since they lack the proper forge and tools for the job. His friends are stunned by his hidden talent and head out immediately to scavenge for the necessary parts. Outside, Arthur is hacking away at a frozen trunk. He stops to rest, noting the icy wood makes the work grueling. All of a sudden, Barrett appears, sounding frantic as he calls out for Julian. Julian asks what is wrong, and the old soldier points toward a village across the ridge that feels completely wrong. You and I are going to want to see this. They reach the high ground and spot a camp. Julian notes the small numbers, but before they can move, he catches sight of something moving in the shadows. Two men are dragging a massive beast, and Barrett is horrified by its size. It is a boar, clearly rotting with infection. The old veteran wonders if they should shout a warning to them. Julian refuses to move in. They have no idea if those strangers are actually good people or not, so they decide to watch them. Back at the base, he tells the group about the camp. Elinor figures they must be using fortified tents with proper living quarters hidden inside the perimeter. The group maps a detour past an old graveyard to reach them, though the path is shrouded in dark woods. Silas still fears they will eventually have a deadly encounter with those men. Elinor, meanwhile, asks if those people have been hunting in the same forest as them. Julian notes that cutting trees leaves a trail. If anyone finds the fresh stumps, they will know others are nearby. Barrett suggests they take Elinor to the cliff tomorrow, since her noble training gave her incredible eagle eyes. The girl joins the patrol the next day and quickly counts 10 armed souls within the camp. And that's where we leave it. She whispers that they look normal, yet their faces are completely soulless. All right, you and I are about to watch a trip turn creepy with 10 hollow figures just standing there. Jasper says they were moving like lifeless dolls. Back at the manor, Cecilia admits the more she thinks about that camp, the more it haunts her dreams. Little Alice jumps into her lap, thrilled to see her. Cecilia asks if she had fun, and the girl says she rode her horse for 2 hours. Suddenly, the child starts sniffing Cecilia, which makes her wonder if something is wrong with her clothes. Alice says her friend smells different. Hearing that, Cecilia asks if she actually stinks, but the young girl just shakes her head. The girl says Cecilia usually smells like sweet fruit, but now it is musty. And it is the same for our main lead, Julian. So, the two of them start wondering exactly where that strange scent came from. Alice looks like she knows the truth, but she keeps quiet and just pulls Cecilia away so they can finally eat dinner. In the town forums, people are talking about the rising heat and wondering if the great frost is finally over. Reading that, Julian realizes everyone will lower their guard just before the blizzard hits. At this rate, there will be almost no survivors left in the kingdom. Wanting to help, Julian decides to warn the community about the storm and tells everyone to hide food in safe cellars. He feels some relief for doing his part. Now it is up to the others to believe him. Heading upstairs, he finds Jasper and Cecilia looking incredibly excited about something. They start talking about rumors of the thaw, but Julian tells them not to be optimistic because an avalanche can strike at any moment now. He says having hope is fine, but they must be ready for the worst. He worries he sounds harsh, but that blizzard is a matter of life and death for them. Later on, Bram falls ill from pure exhaustion because he pushed himself way too hard while cutting logs for winter. So, the survivors split into teams of 3 to scavenge for more supplies. The next day, the old man is feeling better and goes to join the search, where they eventually find a crate of useful glass bottles. After a while, Jasper calls Julian over because he thinks he sees someone lurking in the distance. Near the gate, they spot a figure, and based on their stance, they know it is not a monster. Jasper says they are likely alone since nobody lives nearby. They use a spyglass to get a better look and realize the stranger is watching them. Without a word, the man turns around and vanishes. Julian says they will not be safe for long. He tells Jasper they should move all supplies to the inner fortress immediately. Now pay attention. Jasper calls him over to see something that might just change the game for their survival. Julian says yes, since his friend looks so confident. Then the engineer shows him the heavy crossbow he built, calling it a masterpiece. He warns it is only a prototype. Getting the right angle is tricky, but he promises it shoots straight and true. After that, he admits he only has 10 bolts ready for now. Julian says the weapon is heavier than expected, and Jasper explains he did everything possible to keep the frame light. Jasper teaches Julian how to load the new mechanism. He tells him to take a test shot, but before he can fire, a massive explosion rocks the air. While calming Alice down, Cecilia realizes the blast came from the direction of the nearby village. She warns the others quickly, saying she saw a flash of light tear through the dark forest. Jasper wonders if they should head toward the camp to investigate the situation. Julian says no, because monsters from every direction will follow that sound and pass their outpost on the way. There will be a massive, terrifying horde. Immediately, everyone takes their combat positions. Jasper warns them that the dead are finally at their doorstep. The horde rushes the gates, but as they reach the walls, Cecilia and the old man take them down with precision. Julian spots a giant variant over 7 feet tall among the undead, and it is charging straight toward his position. You and I can see the panic. At this rate, the monster will breach the wall and overrun them. Julian did not expect to test the new crossbow this soon. He pulls the trigger, but the bolt flies way past the massive monster. Panicking, he reloads while the monster scales the wall. Seeing the giant right in front of him makes him freeze. Still, he does everything to stay calm, because he cannot let that nightmare get to the other side of the defense. Finally, the protagonist manages to reload the crossbow and aims it directly at the monster's skull. This time, the bolt knocks the beast off the wall, leaving Julian impressed by how much power that weapon has. Meanwhile, another monster tries to leap over the wall near Jasper. At the gate, the pair keep fighting with their long spears. And that is where we leave it. Trust me, you and I need to see if they actually survive this brutal ambush. All right, you and I are back with 𝑭𝒓𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏, who's realizing these undead variants have much thicker skin than before. Serafina agrees, noting it was way harder to drive her blade in and pull it back out. A few hours pass, and Alistair has fired every bolt he had. Thankfully, it looks like the undead have finally been cleared. The group regroups, and Julian warns that the number of variants is rising. Nearly 1 in 10 is different now. After that brutal wave, their coin count hits 24. At this rate, the young lord can afford that second mystery chest soon. Suddenly, a signal flash catches his eye. It is Alara from the watchtower, warning them that someone is approaching fast. Quickly, Alistair orders everyone to their posts, while he scales a platform to get a better view of the horizon. Someone is sprinting from the direction of the ruined village toward their gate. The stranger is unarmed and running for his life. Alistair is out of bolts, but hopes the crossbow's threat is enough. The man rushes toward the entrance, but before he can make it another step, Alistair shouts for him to halt, threatening to shoot if he moves. He demands the man identify himself immediately. Trembling, the stranger claims he escaped from the village and barely made it out of that nightmare alive. When asked why he fled his camp, the survivor claims a madwoman broke in and started a massacre. Suddenly, a few undead appear, likely trailing him all the way from the village. Terrified, the man lunges for the warehouse, begging for sanctuary. Now pay attention, Alistair warns him to stay back, but the man is desperate, pleading for his life. Alistair is torn. If he leaves the man out there, he's a dead man walking for sure. He realizes only pure willpower is keeping the guy upright, considering how far he ran from the village. But they can't just open the gates. He might be hiding a bite. Then, the survivor gets aggressive, threatening to force his way in. Julian levels his crossbow, ready to fire if the man makes a move. The stranger frantically tries to reason with them. The man offers to tell them everything. Alistair thinks he might know about the village or that massive blast from last night. The dead are closing in fast. Screaming in terror, the man promises to reveal everything about a certain blonde woman. Alistair asks for her description, and the man confirms she had short hair. Recognizing it must be Kaylin, Alistair orders the gate opened, but tells Julian to stay sharp. The survivor bolts for the entrance, but trips halfway, giving the undead a chance to close the distance. Julian asks if they should intervene, but Alistair says no. They just need to be ready to slam the gate. The man scrambles back to his feet and makes a final, desperate dash for the open threshold. Now you and I can see the pure panic here. The man barely dives inside to safety, but an undead lunges through the gap, charging straight for Seraphina. Before the beast can touch her, Alistair steps in and puts it down, saving her just in time. With the gates finally barred, the man is profuse with thanks. Alistair insists they clear the undead outside before their noise draws a larger horde. Deep inside the base, Ilara almost gags from the horrific stench clinging to the newcomer. Silas scolds her for being rude, and when she apologizes, the man says he's just covered in filth from the road. Alistair asks whose blood that is, and Derek explains it's undead blood. He figured the monsters wouldn't notice him if he smelled just like them. Alistair hands him a cup of tea, but when he blows on it, his foul breath makes everyone visibly uncomfortable. Alistair finally asks for his name. He is Derek, and he comes from the settlement beyond the Great Peak. Cedric, the man with glasses, asks how he even discovered their hidden warehouse. Derek begs for a change of clothes before answering, seeing how much his stench is bothering everyone around him. Alistair tells him to follow for some clean clothes, and Seraphina joins them just in case. The Lord gives her a weapon to use if things turn ugly. The little girl approaches Alistair later, asking where her grandfather went. He tells her the old man is busy. She whispers a secret. That man smells of rot, exactly like Julian and Seraphina did after the forest expedition. After a while, Derek finally sits down to tell them everything he knows. In his old camp, there were 15 survivors. With children to protect, they struggled to scavenge from the local markets. One lucky day, he returned to his family with a massive haul of food for everyone. His wife and daughter were so grateful. That afternoon, he went to wash up, relieved to find the water still hot. Suddenly, a blast levels the village. Trust me, you and I are just getting started. Trust me, we are about to watch a tragedy turn into a mystery. Arthur wakes up in ruins, his leg crushed, searching desperately for his family. But he finds his wife and daughter buried beneath the stones. As he reaches out, the cold truth hits him. They are already gone. He stands there shattered, unable to grasp this nightmare. Suddenly, the screams of a neighbor echo through the air, directed at a strange intruder. He realizes an enemy has breached the gates and wonders if they used alchemist fire to level the entire village. Desperate to defend himself, he snatches up a heavy branch and creeps out to face these mysterious invaders. Outside, he spots a familiar face, but a crossbow bolt silences the man before he can speak. Arthur tries to help, but death is faster. That is when he sees a blonde woman mercilessly striking down villagers. Outmatched and unarmed, Arthur has no choice but to turn and bolt. She fires at him, but misses by a hair. In his pocket, he feels the small token his young daughter had given him. Her final, heartbreaking plea was for him to survive, no matter the cost. Now pay attention. Julian finds this suspicious. Why would Lady Kaelin attack a village? It makes no sense, especially since it would only draw the undead. Shortly after, Arthur begs to stay in the fort for just one day before moving on. Julian tells him to rest for now, but says he will make his final decision later. Soon, Barnaby appears and gestures for Julian to follow him. In a private study, the old man asks what he thinks of the newcomer. The boy explains the request, but admits he feels uneasy. Something about the man's story feels wrong, like he is hiding a dark secret. Julian decides he must verify Arthur's claims himself. Barnaby looks at him, wondering exactly how the boy plans to do that. Julian declares he is heading back to the ruins. Meanwhile, Sophia helps the newcomer find a quiet corner of the fort to rest. Before leaving, Julian warns his allies not to take their eyes off the mysterious stranger for even a moment. Sophia apologizes for the lack of a proper room, but Arthur insists it is fine. Just then, Barnaby arrives to take over the watch and stay close. Julian asks if Arthur is truly comfortable on the stone floor, and the man replies that his traveler's bedroll is surprisingly soft. Following that, the old man tells Sophia and the young boy it is time for them to get some sleep. But before they go, Barnaby notices Julian is missing. Earlier that night, the clever boy had begged his friends to cover for his secret mission. So Sophia fabricates a lie, claiming their friend is currently suffering from a terrible fever. She closes the heavy door to let him rest. Outside, Barnaby and his fellow knight take their positions to guard the long hallway. Deep in the forest, Julian's vision begins to blur, likely because he has been traveling on foot all night long. He encounters a lone ghoul, but he expected as much. Using his magic satchel, he buys a scent-masking herb to hide his human smell from the monsters. With his remaining silver coins, he also purchases a magic tracking compass, costing him exactly 8 pieces. With the compass in hand, he simply pictures his target. He focuses on Lady Kaelin, and the needle begins to pulse toward her location. The needle only points in a straight line, so Julian knows the path won't be easy. Still, it's enough of a lead to find her. Reaching 𝒑𝒐𝒛𝒆𝒏, he sees nothing but blackened ruins. It seems that at least this part of Arthur's tragic tale was actually the truth. You and I are probably thinking the same thing. Is Lady Kaelin even alive? Julian spots a tent, but the magic compass won't tell him if she's breathing. Still, he knows a warrior of her caliber likely found a way to survive. He knows he must search the camp, but the place is swarming with ghouls. One wrong step and he will be torn to shreds instantly. He hesitates, realizing that if he retreats now, he will never know if Arthur was telling him the truth or a lie. Just as he prepares to turn back to the fort, the compass needle suddenly twitches, pointing directly toward the center of the tent. Seeing that movement, Julian believes that Lady Kaelin is actually alive in there. Suddenly, a loud crash lures the ghouls away. Julian watches, unsure if it was a distraction from one of her allies or pure luck. Seizing the chance, he pushes forward through the debris. He reaches for the explosive vial that Barnaby had gifted him for his protection. He had been keeping it hidden since they left. The old knight had warned Julian to only use it in a moment of absolute desperation. Holding the vial, the boy feels a surge of confidence, though he prays he won't be forced to shatter it tonight. He spots a fallen ghoul lying in the mud. Strangely, there isn't a single bite mark on the woman's pale, cold corpse. He examines another body riddled with crossbow wounds, meaning it survived the initial blast. Despite being in the open, none of these corpses show signs of being eaten. This discovery only makes Julian more certain that Arthur is hiding a huge secret. Trapped inside the tent, Lady Kaelin wonders how much longer she can possibly remain hidden from the monsters outside. She heard the ghouls chase after a galloping horse, but she has no idea how many remain. She is defenseless now, having used all her bolts. All she has is a small dagger. Stick with me, this is where things get truly wild. Alara freezes. Someone S in the room. Trust me, you and I are about to see a game of cat and mouse go horribly wrong as she prepares to strike from the shadows. She wonders if the man even knows she is there. Suddenly, Alaric demands she come down from the attic. He's seen right through her. Realizing the game is up, Alara has no choice but to surrender, slowly raising her hands in defeat. She's stunned he found her, but Alaric isn't here for small talk. He coldly tells her to shut her mouth. He's the one in charge now. Alara tries to act calm, claiming she isn't carrying any dangerous weapons. He orders her to turn around. As she does, he spots a sharp dagger tucked tightly into her waist. Alaric commands her to drop the blade. With a sigh, she tosses it onto the wooden floor as ordered. She quickly apologizes for her past crimes, claiming she only did what was necessary to survive this dying world. Alara asks what he wants, but he reminds her who holds the power. He demands to know why she slaughtered the innocent people of the nearby village. She just laughs. Those villagers, they were anything but human by the time she arrived. After their paths split, she sought food in Oakhaven, only to find the locals were actually eating the dead. A month passed, and the whole village was rotting. They weren't just sick, they were becoming monsters in every way that mattered. It was like they lost their souls, existing only to hunt and feed. They would stare into the void for hours, their skins smelling of ancient, putrid decay. Perhaps that's why the Rotwalkers ignored them, making the undead nothing more than easy prey for these savages. Alara claims she attacked because those people were worse than any monster. Pay attention here, she tells him to check the village well, where the bones of innocent humans lie rotting at the bottom. Right after that, she asks why the hero is so shocked. In this lawless land, kindness is dead, and the world is now ruled by monsters in human skin who believe they own everything in sight. After that, she says Alaric should be grateful. She knew all about his hidden warehouse and the children inside, yet he chose to ignore the real danger and attack her instead. Having told him everything, Alara asks him to lower his weapon since she's finally cooperating with him. Outside, the Rotwalkers begin surrounding the cabin. She warns him that wasting time now will get them both killed. Suddenly, an undead smashes through the door. Alara grabs her dagger and sprints up the stairs to escape the claws. A monster lunges, but she kicks it back with incredible force before finishing it off without hesitation. The noise draws even more creatures. Alara rips a heavy plank from the stairs, using the wood to bash several monsters back down into the dark shadows. But a massive wave of undead is already swarming in. She grins, saying this madness is driving her crazy, as she continues to slash through the encroaching horde. In a flash of movement, she swings around the banister and delivers a brutal flying kick to a zombie's face. Another monster tries to bite her, but Alara dodges and locks her legs around its neck, slamming it down hard. After the brutal fight, she collapses on the stairs. You and I both saw that coming, right? Alaric admits he's actually impressed she took down 6 of those monsters all on her own. She asks why the Rotwalkers didn't even touch him. Alaric points his crossbow at her, stating he has his own secret methods for survival. Alara asks why he's doing this. With a dark glare, he says she knows the reason. She's a dangerous threat who has been spying on his fortress and gauging his true combat strength. He can't let her live. Once he finishes Alara off, the tracking magic on her body finally deactivates. Since 6 hours remained on the spell, 3 silver coins are refunded back into his mysterious inventory. Investigating the well, Alaric finds the bones she mentioned. Her story was true. He decides it is time to return to his base. On the road, he cuts through several undead, but even more are beginning to chase him down the path. With the main road swarming, he realizes he must take an unfamiliar trail through the dark woods to survive. He manages to lose the horde, but stays on high alert since he doesn't know what dangers lurk in this area. He spends 2 silver to buy a scent-masking elixir and hide himself from the monsters. Alaric realizes he desperately needs shelter as his body temperature starts dropping fast. He follows a hidden path until he finally runs into an old stone building. It looks like an abandoned tavern, the perfect place to hide and recover his strength. Inside, he finds an open door and enters, only to come face to face with a rot walker. It lunges, but he blocks the strike with his steel baton. He kicks the monster back with a heavy boot before striking a final blow to end its life. He sighs in relief, having narrowly cheated death. But get this, his weapon is now completely shattered, leaving him vulnerable for whatever nightmare crawls out of the dark next. Arthur buys the skull-crushing hammer. Stick with me, we are about to watch things get really violent. But the weapon only has 10 uses. Arthur is fuming. That durability makes the whole thing feel like a total scam. With the deal done, he heads off to rest. But first, he has to dump that rotting corpse outside. Suddenly, something stops him. On the dead man's cloak is the heraldry of the House Sterling Syndicate. He feels sick knowing this was once a fellow knight. Why was he so far from the capital? He just takes the cloak to survive the frost. While surveying the ruins of the outpost, Arthur wonders if the man actually lived here. He likely went out for supplies and returned cursed by the plague. Arthur finally sits down, since it looks like the area is clear of any other monsters. He needs to crash after being awake for 30 hours, but before he closes his eyes. Pay attention here, Arthur finds a secret ledger. In the notes, an alchemist writes that one of the subjects in his dark experiments was acting completely possessed. And when he reported the mutation to his master, the man reacted like he had been expecting it all along. The test subjects grew more violent, while the Lord's secret business trips became more and more frequent. When the apocalypse truly began, the High Alchemist ordered his servant to travel straight to London. And even though he was terrified, he went. He swore to expose the truth later, and Arthur realizes this conspiracy is massive. After reading that, the boy knows this ledger is directly linked to the current outbreak. He notices a page was torn out and wonders what was on it. The ink is just a frozen, illegible mess. He suspects the one responsible was the Lord's second son. And the first son was the troublemaker luring the hordes. Arthur admits House Sterling is definitely hiding something sinister. Arthur pockets the ledger for now and tries to rest while his head is still pounding. After a while, he prepares to leave, but he plans to return later and uncover the rest of the secrets. For now, his priority is getting back to the Citadel, because Douglas is a massive threat to everyone. He makes it back to base and immediately finds his teammates. He is relieved that nothing tragic happened while he was gone. Arthur asks about Douglas, and Sarah says he's been out cold. He hasn't caused any trouble since he slept for 10 hours. Arthur asks where Julian is, and Ben explains that the man is just taking a short break. The group storms into Douglas's room with steel drawn and demands he wake up. He asks why everyone is armed to the teeth. Arthur calls him a liar. He went to that supposedly peaceful village and saw exactly what they were eating down there. Suddenly, Douglas's face shifts and he asks what the problem is. He claims he had to do it to survive. He says he would do even worse things, just to keep his family fed. Now you and I both know this guy is gone. Arthur decides there is no choice but to exile him immediately. Arthur points out that Douglas lost his family but still slept peacefully for 10 hours. That is not a human reaction. Douglas sneers and says that in this world, the best thing is not letting your emotions take over. He claims that in their current situation, this kind of cold evolution was necessary for their survival. The group refuses to accept him and demands he leave. He calls them crazy because he thinks he will die alone. Arthur says he is no longer human. Down in that village, he saw the small bones of children. This man is a monster. In a way, Douglas was turning into a zombie because his emotions were dead, and the monsters would not attack him. Douglas claims the dead were chasing him, but Arthur knows He lured the ghouls on purpose to open the gates. Hearing that, Douglas snaps, realizing Arthur had been planning to investigate and expose him from the very start. Arthur levels his crossbow at him and says if he won't leave the easy way, he will leave the hard way. Douglas's body begins to warp, and he refuses to be kicked out. Arthur realizes the man is mutating into a variant. Before things get even worse, Arthur takes the monster out and kills him right where he stands. Just like with a zombie, a coin drops. Arthur is shocked. The system actually counted Douglas as one of the monsters. The older knight apologizes to the group. He does not know how they see his actions, but he could not let him live. Arthur says it is fine because they made the right call. That man would have caused a massive disaster later on. Suddenly, Arthur remembers a line in the ledger about the different types of zombies that exist. And trust me, we are about to see how the environment creates something far worse than the average Walking Dead. All right, you and I are about to see if eating undead flesh creates a brand new monster. Later, Julian approaches Audrey to discuss that strange, rotting stench she caught off that traveler earlier. Julian asks if it's the same rot she sensed on him and Sienna. She confirms, but claims she's only ever smelled it once before in her life, back in the old village. It was the old Baron who carried that same deathly odor. Arthur explains the Baron was bitten by a crawler and desperately tried to hide his infection from the village. He bound his arm tight to stop the rot, slowing the infection, but he still turned into a mindless beast days later. Julian realizes Audrey can actually sense the blight within people. He thanks her and begs her to give him a warning if she ever smells it again. 3 days before the great storm, the temperature plummets and Silas starts looking pale and sickly. Julian notes the chill has dropped below 30 degrees. Cedric is devastated because the weather had actually been improving until just a few days ago, or so they thought. Silas mentions that every soul in the outpost is terrified of the frost. Julian is just glad they hoarded extra supplies while the sun was out. Silas insists they head out immediately to secure their massive pile of firewood. The group sticks together in the woods because splitting up means becoming an easy meal for the undead lurking in the shadows. Silas admits something felt wrong about that cursed night. He was bitten, but chose to lock himself away in total isolation until the end. Stick with me. His journal says he wasn't the heroic type to sacrifice himself for the sake of others. Julian agrees, wondering if perhaps someone else was the one who locked that door from the outside. Silas ponders the dark theory, keeping it in mind just in case they aren't actually alone in this frozen hell. Regardless, they keep the journal, planning to return for more clues once the blizzard finally passes over them. Cedric begins grumbling about the lack of fresh meat, asking Arthur if he has ever hunted anything besides the common wild boars. The veteran reveals he once slew a great white lion during his younger days. Cedric scoffs since those beasts have been extinct for centuries, but the old man claims that scrolls and records don't reveal everything in this world. Silas approaches Julian, joking that their ragtag group is starting to look like a real noble family. Julian admits the bond feels natural. Audrey smiles, genuinely happy they've grown so close, and praying that this peace lasts through the harsh winter ahead. Silas, however, can only focus on the monster of a storm that is about to strike. Just 1 day before the blizzard, they start reinforcing the manor windows. Julian warns that if the glass freezes solid, a single gust of wind could shatter it like thin ice. Night falls while Julian stays awake, waiting. When nothing happens, he starts to worry that his secret warnings might have been a massive mistake after all. Not even the common folks are mentioning an incoming blizzard. 50 minutes pass, and it's finally time to swap shifts. He stands up to wake Arthur for the night watch. But pay attention here. The sky suddenly explodes with lightning, signaling that the nightmare has finally begun. Arthur wakes with the others, warning that a tempest this violent won't burn itself out in just 1 or 2 days of hiding. The survivors thank Julian. If they hadn't fortified the shed on his orders, they would have been left for dead. Cedric asks if he saw the warning. Julian looks puzzled, but Cedric mentions a mysterious post that predicted this exact disaster long before it happened. Julian gets nervous, but thankfully they don't suspect a thing. The others dismiss the rumors, especially since the signal stones have completely died. But then, the real horror begins for every survivor in the manor. They realize the entire kingdom is being buried under the ice. The temperature has plummeted to -40 degrees. Cedric tries to rush outside, but Julian grabs him before he can freeze to death in the storm. They wrap him in thick furs, warning him to check the gauge and return instantly before the lethal wind kills him right where he stands. Cedric steps into the white void, reaches the thermometer, and stares at the reading in pure, frozen shock. He stumbles back inside, gasping that it's -46 degrees. Shivering violently, Cedric realizes this situation is on a whole different level. Julian asks if his buddy knows the exact moment their magic spirit fuel will finally turn to ice. Julian orders everyone to the second floor. Cedric needs to get warm while the rest prepare for the worst. They scramble to gather every single cylinder of spirit fuel. He commands Audrey to watch the thermometer and ensure the heat stays above 42 below. "You and I just witnessed a true battle for survival." Silas promises her they will make it through this together, no matter what. "All right, you and I are diving into a story where a mysterious letter warned that a deadly blizzard was coming." A few days later, the wind dies down, but the freezing cold remains, forcing the survivors to grit their teeth and endure a little longer. Alistair says the number of new bulletin updates has dropped. Arthur realizes most didn't survive, as he heard countless buildings have completely collapsed under the weight of the frost. 2 more days pass, and the group has just enough food to last them roughly 2.5 weeks. Suddenly, Barnaby bursts in panicking, shouting that a group of armed soldiers is marching straight toward the warehouse windows right now. They quickly take up defensive positions. Julian shouts for the soldiers to halt, demanding that only a single representative approaches their warehouse gate. One man steps forward alone. You and I have to wonder if they really trekked through the snow on a desperate, blind hunch. He conceals a weapon inside his heavy jacket, ready to strike, but before he can even make a move, he realizes the lead soldier is actually Brian. Brian looks stunned that the kid somehow managed to survive this long. Alistair smiles, noting what a small world it is. The soldiers finally relax once they see that the two of them are actually old acquaintances. Brian explains they lost Kelly's trail while heading north and couldn't find her. Arthur has to break the news to him: she is dead. Brian asks if he's absolutely certain, and the kid confirms he saw her end with his own eyes. Curious, Brian asks if they've been bunking in this warehouse. Alistair confirms he's here staying with all of his friends. That's when Brian admits their own shelter was destroyed. Their repairs failed after the blizzard and won't hold up, so he asks if they can move in. Arthur isn't sure what the right move is. The soldiers look starved and weak. If Arthur turns them away, they will almost certainly all die in the cold. But their own food supply is already low. Alistair also worries that if they refuse entry, these desperate soldiers might just attack them without even thinking. Brian promises they won't force their way in if they are rejected. That catches the kid off guard. Brian is clearly choosing to stay human. He tells Brian to wait while they deliberate. Serena is firmly against it, knowing their food will only last 1 week with more mouths. Alistair votes yes because having the military on their side would massively increase their total firepower. Arthur asks Barnaby's opinion, and he agrees to help. They are just young men stranded in a foreign country, after all. They are fighting to keep their humanity, and Barnaby wants their own group to do exactly the same thing. Alistair admits that this time, he truly wants to choose the path of kindness. "I know what you are thinking." They let the soldiers inside and serve them soup, and their eyes practically glow from the taste. One woman's ankles are injured, so Sienna brings her an ice pack to help. The group bonds quickly, with the soldiers teaching the kids how to shoot and maintain their heavy weapons. Sarah becomes close with Jessie, the only female soldier. Even Bram befriends a soldier who speaks their language fluently because of an old flame. Alice is gifted a pair of military binoculars. She is amazed that she can now see everything from a distance. The days pass in total peace and happiness, but trust me, you and I are not ready for what happens next. One night, a strange glow appears. Brian warns the group that it can only be a fire. Arthur freezes in horror, while Brian wonders why he is reacting this way. Jensen shouts that the building on fire was the one housing all their food supplies.